Chapter 23-28. When one looked up at the starry night sky, they would be greeted by the sight of countless eyes. What kind of experience would that be? Even people with trypophobia would be scared to death. And all of these countless eyes were looking at the living beings on the ground below. Every single creature raised their head, and they could feel that those countless eyes seemed to be looking at them alone. This was extremely terrifying. In particular, the eyes in the sky had not only appeared within the Purple Star ruins, but they had also encompassed the entire kingdom of the 9 states. All of the mortals and cultivators were greeted by those terrifying eyes. They didn't even dare to raise their heads to look up at the sky. Some of them hid in their houses, some of them looked down at the ground, and some of the more powerful cultivators were struck by an indescribable sense of dizziness. What the hell is that? Erlang Shin's third eye was also looking up at the sky, and he was also struck by the urge to shrink his third eye back into his body. However, the celestial Thearcha's expression shifted drastically at this moment. No. This thing's range is too vast. It's even encompassing the entire kingdom of the 9 states. It's definitely not just a tribulation targeting the heaven-crushing glazed palace. Chang-Yi looked up into the sky as she spoke in a cold and ethereal voice. That's indeed the case. I can sense a deep sense of malice from the heavens. This malice is directed toward all of our human race and the heaven-crushing united army. Right at this moment, the celestial Thearcha's voice transmission talisman suddenly lit up. He could sense the presence of Bai Ling from the 4-9 Immortal sect, and he immediately accepted the call. Pavilion Lord Bai, what's the situation right now? Disaster has befallen the kingdom of the 9 states. The Celestial Court should immediately send people to guard the Gem State, Stone Dragon State, Heavenly River State, and Lightning State. Leave the other 5 states to our 4-9 Immortal sect. Bai Ling's urgent voice made the Celestial Thearcha's expression shift. He had no time to lament the fact that the Celestial Court was only fit to guard 4 states, while the 4-9 Immortal sect had to guard the other 5. Who's the enemy? Bai Ling fell silent for a few seconds before replying. The enemy is from the sky. At this moment, the densely packed eyes in the sky began to flicker with madness and resentment. Darkness surged and terror descended. All of the living beings in the kingdom of the 9 states could sense the approaching aura of death. Some of them fled in panic, while others wept and knelt to the ground, begging the heavens for forgiveness. The celestial Tharch had no time to hesitate at all and immediately began to arrange for experts to be stationed in the various provinces. Emperor Ziwei, Emperor Tianhuang, and war god Erlang led the 10 million strong kingdom of the 9 states united army to defend the Stone Dragon State. Emperor Qing Hua and Ao Xiaowu led the 10 million strong kingdom of the 9 states united army to defend the Gem State. Chang-Yi and Emperor Chang Xing guarded the Heavenly River State, while the Celestial Tharch led the 20 million strong kingdom of the 9 states united army to defend the Thunder State. As for the top forces of the 4 major sects, they had returned to their respective sects to prepare for battle. They could use their sects' top formations to achieve a better defensive effect. Above the Purple Star ruins, Chen Chen was looking toward the kingdom of the 9 states with concern in his eyes. At this moment, Bai Ling called them again. She told them to focus on crushing the heavens and leave protecting the kingdom of the 9 states to the kingdom of the 9 states united army. It was still that calm and confident tone. For some reason, Chen Chen felt a peculiar sense of security from Bai Ling. He had a feeling that Bai Ling had made a lot of preparations, and it was exactly because of this that she was able to play such a powerful and reliable role at this critical juncture. In the sky above, countless eyes began to surge. A series of bodies materialized from darkness, exuding an aura of madness and destruction. Sharp claws began to appear, and their bodies grew larger and larger. Their bloodthirsty eyes stared intently at the heaven-crushing glazed palace members. Some of them were laughing, while others were roaring. If the heavens have desires, the heavens will become demons. Is this a heavenly demon tribulation? Cyril looked up at the monsters in the sky with a grave expression. A calamity is about to descend upon the kingdom of the 9 states. Who would have thought that the consciousness of the heavenly Tao would choose a time like this to attack all living beings? Isn't it afraid that the heavenly Tao will collapse on its own? Chen Chen looked up at the sky with an expression of incredulity on his face. The consciousness of the heavenly Tao should have instinctively refrained from attacking powerless mortals on a large scale. In order to maintain the autonomy and fairness of the heavenly Tao, it shouldn't have done so. The only beings that had the right to do so were the heavenly gods. But now, the heavenly Tao seemed to have changed. It also seemed to have gone berserk. Thick drops of black ink fell from the sky. There were countless eyes on the surface of the inky black ink, and the pupils of those eyes began to expand as the ink began to transform into balls of black matter. Hiss, 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 hiss. Like the screeches of hell, they drew closer and closer. Immediately afterward, balls of inky black matter began to materialize into a series of twisted, inky black monsters that rained down from the sky like a torrential downpour. They had extremely sharp claws, and a terrifying corrosive aura enveloped their bodies. There were tens of thousands of them, and they pounced toward the heaven-crushing glazed palace with no fear of death. Roar, roar, roar! These demons descended from the sky and landed on the defensive formation of the heaven-breaking glazed palace. Crackling sounds rang out, accompanied by the sharp sounds of sharp claws tearing at the formation. There were also many heavenly demons that pounced toward Chen Chen and Cyril outside the formation. However, they were all pulverized into dust by Chen Chen's spotless realm and Cyril's true demon origin energy. Cyril remained unmoved in the face of the attacks of tens of thousands of heavenly demons. He was like an invincible god-fiend, but there was not the slightest hint of relief on his face. It's not difficult to deal with these heavenly demons. The difficult part is how to break through this tribulation. If we're too slow, the billions of humans will probably, at this moment, in various parts of the kingdom of the 9 states. Balls of black ink also fell from the sky, transforming into terrifying heavenly demons. Hurry up and run! The monsters are falling from the sky. Sob, sob, sob. Help, someone save us. Mortals with no cultivation bases fled in panic. Spirit Sword State, Thousand Flow City. Balls of black ink began to fall. Boom! A heavenly demon over 100 feet tall with 8 arms fell into the city, and the shockwave it set off instantly pulverized a dozen or so houses in the surrounding area. Humans, die! The heavenly demon roared and quickly charged toward the fleeing humans. Its 8 arms were like poisonous snakes as they grabbed at the fleeing humans. Every time it grabbed a human, it would use its arms to devour them into nothingness. The residents of Thousand Flow City fled in terror. Meanwhile, the heavenly demon was like a tiger among a flock of sheep, slaughtering them with abandon. The mortals had no idea that demons would fall from the sky to hunt them down. Thousand Flow City was instantly plunged into a sea of despair. "Mommy, get up, get up!" A young girl grabbed onto her mother, who had been pushed down by the surging crowd, only to be knocked down by the crowd herself. At this moment, the 8-armed heavenly demon had already reached her. A twisted smile appeared on its humanoid face, and its arms suddenly grabbed toward the young girl and her mother without any hesitation. The young girl screamed and closed her eyes. However, the pain she was expecting didn't descend. Instead, she felt a little cold. Was this what it felt like to die? She opened her tightly shut eyes to find a young man looking at her with a smile on his face. "Can you get up on your own?" The young girl nodded hesitantly as she looked at the handsome young man. She then looked behind the young man to find that the extremely terrifying 8-armed heavenly demon had already been split in half down the middle, and it was being burned by blue flames. The young man activated his voice transmission talisman. 4-9 Immortal Sect, Sun Yulua has returned. His voice fell. The young girl couldn't find the young man anymore. However, blue light was still flashing in other places. Every time it flashed, a heavenly demon would fall. It was as if the stars were twinkling. These were the stars that protected this city. Chapter 23-29. Thousand Flow City had transformed into a terrifying realm, and one heavenly demon after another fell from the sky. Boom, 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 crimson light surged into the heavens above Thousand Flow City. Each and every streak of crimson light would reduce a heavenly demon to a blob of ink. 4-9 Immortal Sect, Cassidy, in position. Tobias in position. Merlin in position. The three most powerful beings of the Blood Pavilion charged forward with unstoppable momentum. The Blood Tribe mighty figures who had once been viewed with extreme hostility by the humans had now become guardians who were willing to lay down their lives for the human race. Within the Thousand Flow Imperial Palace, this was where the heavenly demons were most focused. The heavenly demons were more inclined to kill powerful cultivators, and tens of thousands of heavenly demons crashed into the Thousand Flow Imperial Palace, even destroying the palace's formation. The cultivators fought with the heavenly demons with all their might. As one of the 9 Imperials, the Thousand Flow Imperial family was naturally quite powerful. However, the heavenly demons were far too ferocious, and there was almost no end to them. Damn it, there are so many monsters. When are they going to end? The Emperor of the Thousand Flow Imperial family swept through the air with his sword, which pulverized all of the heavenly demons around him. Before he had a chance to catch his breath, more heavenly demons pounced toward him. Your Majesty, should we fight or run? A divine general had his arm sliced off by a heavenly demon, and he ran toward the most powerful man in an extremely disheveled manner. Run? Where can we run to now? The Thousand Flow Imperial family looked at the terrifying heavenly demons charging toward them. There's no way out now. We can only fight to the death. For the human race and for ourselves. Fight to the death! Fight to the death! All of the members of the Thousand Flow Imperial family yelled in unison. Spell techniques rang out incessantly, weapons clashed with sharp claws, and blood sprayed through the air. The Imperial Palace had become the most brutal battlefield of all. It could be said that the Thousand Flow Imperial family had drawn over half of the firepower for Thousand Flow City. They were already the last line of defense for Thousand Flow City, just as the heavenly demons were about to descend into despair. 3 lithe and graceful figures suddenly appeared in the air above the Thousand Flow Imperial family. 4-9 Immortal Sect, Ada. Jin Ling, Jin Yao, I'm in position. All of a sudden, a massive golden joint formation took shape in the sky. Boundless blood power and soul power instantly pulverized hundreds of heavenly demons into nothingness. The members of the Thousand Flow Imperial family immediately became excited. It's them. The 3 holy golden blood cultivators of the 4-9 Immortal Sect's Blood Pavilion. These triplets can even unleash Dao integration stage power when they combine their powers through a special spell formation. We finally have a Dao integration stage super mighty figure to assist us. Some members of the royal family were already crying. In their eyes, these 3 beautiful blood tribe supreme beings were existences akin to messiahs. At the same time, in the neighboring celestial water city, a white dog shrouded in a divine wind was crazily pouncing on the heavenly demon that was descending from the sky. Wherever the heavenly demon fell, it would fly there and catch the heavenly demon with its mouth wide open. It would eat one at a time, as if it was sweeping up chicken legs that had fallen from the sky. Pavilion Lord Dubai, is it really okay for you to eat like this? A 4-9 Immortal Sect disciple's flesh crawled upon seeing this. It's completely okay, woof. It's sweet and sticky, do you want to try it, woof? Dubai wagged its tail with a buoyant grin. Erg. A female disciple couldn't help but retch. It was truly difficult for them to imagine that the mighty sect leader and Lin's favorite steed was him. A beautiful and gentle woman in a colorful dress sprinkled powder into the sky. All of the heavenly demons that came into contact with the powder were reduced to puddles of ink. This woman was none other than Enlin's beast pet, Little Goo. She was the most normal beast pet among all of Enlin's beast pet. Dabai, you've eaten something bad. No one has time to treat your injuries during this critical period, Little Goo advised in a gentle voice. Ha ha, it's all right. I can eat any heavenly demon, woof. Dabai chuckled confidently. Xiao Chou pointed at the dragon-bone heavenly demon, which stretched for hundreds of thousands of feet, in the distance. You can eat that heavenly demon? Dabai shuddered at the sight of the inky black heavenly demon, which was imbued with destructive power, and he didn't dare to say anything. This was not something that he could face. At this moment in Thousand Flow City, great destruction was about to descend. This was the most majestic city in the Spirit Sword state. An extremely gargantuan heavenly demon with no end in sight had appeared. It had an outer shell that resembled dragon bones, and its entire body was inky black. It had 9 toes on its feet, and its claws were like divine sabers. With just a few light swipes, several abyss-like ravines were carved into the city. All of the residents and cultivators who had just received a dose of reassurance from the powerful cultivators of the 4-9 Immortal sect were plunged into despair again. One sword cultivator after another rose into the sky before unleashing sword intent toward the terrifying heavenly demon. However, when those swords landed on the dragon bone shell, muffled explosions could be heard. Not even a single crack appeared on the shell. At this moment, the monstrous head of the heavenly demon cracked open, and its tail bone pierced through the air toward a return to void stage mighty figure. That return to void stage mighty figure was targeted by the terrifying heavenly demon. Just the aura released by the heavenly demon was enough to freeze him to the point where he couldn't even move. This attack was far too fast, and its aura was far too terrifying. All of this caused the mind of the return to void stage mighty figure, who was at the pinnacle of all cultivators, to go blank at this moment. Suddenly, a blue domain spread through heaven and earth. Extreme frost descended. A woman wielding a great ice sword appeared from afar, and her sword slashed down upon the tailbone. Boom! An extremely powerful true meaning of sword Tao erupted. The tailbone was imbued with the power of the heavenly Tao, and it stabbed forward with unstoppable force, pushing the woman's sword back. The woman let loose a clear cry. Not only was she not afraid, but her sword intent became even more powerful. Icy frost heavenly strike. The frosty aura of the great ice sword expanded for several hundred kilometers, and the sword struck nothing but air. The heavenly dragon bone demon howled in shock as its tailbone was sent flying into the air. At this moment, all of the other cultivators of the Spirit Sword state were astonished. They were powerful cultivators of the Spirit Sword state, but they had never seen such exquisite sword intent before. 4-9 Immortal sect, Lu Qianhuan is here. The woman's blue robe danced in the wind, and her sword projection was like snow. She raised her head and spoke in a cold voice. All of the cultivators finally came to a sudden realization. The woman was the renowned sword pavilion lord of the 4-9 Immortal sect, Lu Qianhuan. Roar! The heavenly dragon bone demon flared up with rage again after being sliced into two by Lu Qianhuan's sword strike. A terrifying aura that rivaled that of a cultivator at the Tao integration pinnacle stage felt like it was going to collapse the entire city. Even Lu Qianhuan was unable to withstand this power. At this moment, a massive sun suddenly appeared in the sky, tearing through the inky black sky. Boundless light illuminated the world, making it as bright as day. A pleasant, seductive, and passionate voice sounded. Praise the sun. Chapter 23:30. Am I dreaming? My God! Even the stars and the moon have been shattered by the heavenly Tao. What's going on with this sun? And it's so warm. It's not hot at all. All of the cultivators of Thousand Flow City let loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. The sun hung high in the sky, and there was bound to be a mighty figure descending. Sure enough, there was a woman in a fiery red robe standing beneath the sun. Roar. The dragon-bone heavenly demon's claws tore through the air, and its pitch-black claws were imbued with a boundless power of corrosion as they slashed toward the woman in red. The woman pointed a finger in the air, and a burst of light burst forth, as if it were the light of hope tearing through the heavens. The light crashed into the pitch-black claws and instantly vaporized them into wisps of smoke. The light split the heavens along the way. To the astonishment of all the cultivators, it shattered the bones of the gigantic dragon-bone skyfiend and pierced through the head of the dragon-bone skyfiend. Elder Xiao Hong of the 4-9 Immortal Sect is here. The young girl with a face that could topple nations and bring disaster to the people spoke. Her voice fell, and the sun began to split into countless beams of light that pierced through the bodies of the heavenly demons within Thousand Flow City. All the heavenly demons that came into contact with the light were vaporized into nothingness. Just a single strike had slain several thousand powerful heavenly demons. Over half of the heavenly demons had been vaporized by Xiao Hong's single strike. A heavenly demon at the Tao integration pinnacle stage has been vanquished with a single strike. Is this the power of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure of the 4-9 Immortal Sect? That's great, we're finally saved. All of the cultivators and mortals of Thousand Flow City had tears of excitement welling up in their eyes, and they wanted nothing more than to praise the sun with Xiao Hong. From one city, one could see the entire situation. Powerful beings of the 4-9 Immortal Sect appeared at every critical location of the Kingdom of the Nine State. The Wind Plain State was guarded by 2 Tao Integration Stage True Dragons. The Baihua State was guarded by Phoenix Little Huang and the Great Empress of the Snow Tribe. The Gusu State was guarded by Dongfang Zhuangshi and his disciples. The Purple Star State was guarded by the Ghost Tribe led by the Pill Sage. All of them were engaged in a life-and-death struggle against the heavenly demons, and the Kingdom of the Nine States was bound to perish together. I've already sent you the coordinates of the key nodes where the heavenly demonic tribulation will descend. Make sure to reinforce them and don't miss any of them. Bai Ling's voice sounded. Roger that. Roger that. Got it. Baihua State, Nanling County's main city. Yi Ling leaped onto the black cloud and glanced at the 3D map on her slender wrist. Got it. Up ahead, a towering heavenly demon wielding a staff made of flesh and blood descended from the sky, stepping on mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Light flashed from the staff, and countless civilians and houses were melted into a strange liquid. Yi Ling gripped the hilt of her dagger with one hand as she charged fearlessly toward the 100,000-foot heavenly demon. The 100,000-foot heavenly demon had also noticed her, and it pointed its staff at the slender figure charging toward it. Dark red energy fluctuations instantly swept toward Yi Ling's body. At this moment, the dagger was unsheathed. A frosty light flashed through the sky, and a peerless silvery white blade projection sliced the dark red energy in half before sweeping past the 100,000-foot heavenly demon as well. Yi Ling stopped in her tracks and sheathed her send you safely on your way sword. Ding! The scabbard and hilt clashed, and the sound of metal clashing erupted. The supremely powerful 100,000-foot heavenly demon howled in anguish as its body was quickly sliced in half, and black ink splattered onto the ground. I've finally taken care of another one. The woman brushed aside the strands of hair that had clung to her face as she looked up at the shattered sky. The falling black ink had transformed into a heavenly demon, and the beautiful city had been transformed into a living hell of flames and anguished wails. Her heart throbbed with pain. It still wasn't enough. There was still too little she could do. The divine Tao beneath the young girl's feet suddenly transformed into a sharp, black blade that pierced through the heavenly demons closest to her and minced them into a bloody pulp. She began to chop melons and vegetables in this city. None of the sky demons could withstand a single move from her. Basically, she was in an invincible state where she could kill anything in her way. However, Yi Ling was very anxious. She couldn't truly protect this city, and there were still heavenly demons slaughtering the citizens in the city before she arrived. No, I'm still too slow. I can't go on like this. Yi Ling continued to flash through the sky, slaying one heavenly demon after another. The 4-9 immortal sect disciples who were traveling with her weren't powerful enough. Most of them had to surround one heavenly demon in groups of a dozen or so, and only a few return-to-void stage disciples were able to hold their own. However, there were simply too few cultivators like that. Just as Yi Ling was caught in a dilemma. All of a sudden, the communication device on her wrist suddenly lit up with a red light. Alert, alert! The Vermilion Bird sect is in dire danger. All disciples below the return-to-void stage are advised to retreat. All members above the return-to-void stage are advised to consider whether to participate in the battle. An alert sounded on her wrist. The location of the red dot on the map was extremely close to where Yi Ling was, as the Vermilion Bird sect was situated on the border of the Nanling prefecture. Yi Ling's expression shifted as she cast her gaze toward the gargantuan divine tree in the distance, and her pupils contracted slightly. Her dark assassination divine Tao granted her extremely fearsome night vision and telescopic vision, so she was able to clearly see what was happening on the Vermilion Bird divine tree in the distance. The massive divine tree had already been incinerated by some unknown purple flames. An extremely powerful purple blade projection tore through the Vermilion Bird sect's sect protection formation and sliced the massive divine tree in half. The divine tree that had stood for countless years was falling to the scorching flames. The Vermilion Bird sect has two Dao integration stage super mighty figures, Zhu Shuza and Situ Feng, but even so, the divine tree still fell? Yi Ling gripped her dagger tightly. She knew just how terrifying the enemies the Vermilion Bird sect was facing were. Otherwise, the information bracelet on her wrist wouldn't have sounded such an alert. Should she go over? Yi Ling was hesitant. She probably wouldn't be able to do anything even if she went over now. At this moment, the heavenly demons descending upon the Nanling prefecture became extremely slow. The pressure on the city was drastically reduced. She looked at the devastated city, then at the 4-9 immortal sect cultivators and native cultivators, and she knew that even if she didn't do anything, they would still be able to protect the city. The heavenly demons have slowed down not because we've successfully defended the city, but rather. Yi Ling turned toward the Vermilion Bird sect. That was supposed to be the most sacred place in the Kingdom of the Nine States, but now it was completely sealed off by dark clouds, as if the entire heaven and earth had been transformed into an ocean of despair. Master's wife. That's your second home. Little Ling can't let it be destroyed in this disaster. Yi Ling gritted her teeth and flew toward the Vermilion Bird sect at top speed. Chapter 2331. The Vermilion Bird sect, one of the four great sects of the Kingdom of the Nine States, was currently engulfed in raging purple flames. Once these flames came into contact with a living being, even powerful beings of the Vermilion Bird sect with extremely high cultivation bases couldn't do anything about it. They could only be incinerated into wisps of smoke. The pure and eternal holy vermilion flame dimmed in the face of the purple flames. The divine tree began to topple. This was like doomsday for the Vermilion Bird sect. Mo-hi! Yang Yuan chopped off the man's arm with a single slash. The arm was burning with purple flames, and it was almost instantly reduced to dust. Thank you. Mo-hi turned to Yang Yuan with a grateful expression as he looked at the purple flames with lingering fear in his eyes. He used to like being burned by fire and felt that it was a kind of enjoyment. But now, he only felt fear towards this flame. It was simply too terrifying. It was the epitome of destruction. If Yang Yuan had been a split second slower, he would have been completely devoured by the purple flames. All of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples had already flown away from the divine tree. Lan Yan's eyes were red as she fought with the heavenly demons. Many of her good friends had died in the hands of the heavenly demons, and she was currently crazily killing the heavenly demons to release the anger in her heart. Lan Yan is a little out of control. No, I have to go and help her. She'll be easily killed by the Sky Fiend. As a friend, Yang Yuan couldn't just sit by and do nothing, so he immediately flew toward that direction. Mo Hai swallowed an immortal pill and looked at the divine tree on which he had once lived and cultivated. That divine tree that he had regarded as his author was gradually engulfed by the purple flames. He couldn't suppress the sadness and anger in his heart. It's gone. Everything is gone. He raised his head and looked at the sky that was growing increasingly frenzied. He muttered to himself, "Can we really hold on?" The heavenly demons were still descending upon the Vermilion Bird sect. Even the heavenly demons from the surrounding areas, and even the entire Baihua state, were rushing toward the Vermilion Bird sect. It was as if they wanted to get rid of this thorn first. As for the disciples of the Vermilion Bird sect, they were unable to increase their combat prowess any further. And, most importantly, Mo Hai turned to look at the top of the Tree of God, and an unconcealable fear flashed across his eyes. Suddenly, purple lightning tore through the flames. A figure was suddenly struck by lightning and fell to the ground. Rumble! A bowl-sized pit appeared on the ground. A skinny man was vomiting blood on the ground. There was a large bloody hole in his chest. All the Vermilion Bird sect disciples let loose cries of surprise. This man was none other than Grand Elder Situ Feng of the Vermilion Bird sect. A 3-meter-tall humanoid heavenly demon slowly descended towards Situ Feng, wielding a pair of blue swords and a purple flame tail. Although its body wasn't big, its terrifying aura turned into purple ripples that were enough to affect the area within 1,000 kilometers. This was a heavenly demon so powerful that it caused all the disciples and elders to despair. Funtion's purple flames were released by it, the Vermilion Bird sect's sect-protecting formation was broken by it, and the eternal divine tree of the Vermilion Bird sect was also chopped down by it. It had also killed many disciples and elders of the Vermilion Bird sect. This was a peerless heavenly demon that surpassed everyone's imagination. No way, Elder Situ Feng is currently the most powerful being in the Vermilion Bird sect, but even Elder Situ Feng. Lan Yen covered her mouth with an incredulous expression. At this moment, the peerless heavenly demon had already landed above Situ Feng. It raised its thick black foot and stomped down viciously. Boom! The ground caved in again. All of Situ Feng's bones and tendons snapped, and he threw up another mouthful of blood. Grand Elder! A scarred man in a red sect robe let loose a thunderous roar as he transformed into a holy flame vermilion bird and pounced toward the peerless heavenly demon. He was the sect leader of the Vermilion Bird sect, Zhu Zex. The peerless heavenly demon's expression didn't change in the slightest in the face of the pure white holy flame vermilion bird. The two blue swords suddenly slashed toward the vermilion bird, and two indescribable blue sword projections pierced through the air before slicing off the massive vermilion bird's wings. The vermilion bird let loose a blood-curdling wail before disintegrating into a rain of flames. Its attack had struck a fatal flaw in the spell technique. Zhu Xu's body was also sent flying by the majestic sword Qi. The peerless heavenly demon glanced at Zhu Xuza with a hint of mockery before turning its gaze back to Situ Feng. Its tail that was burning with purple flames was like a scorpion's eyes as it slowly crossed over its head, aiming its sharpest tip at Situ Feng's head. No! Elder Situ! The disciples and elders all yelled in unison. Some of them even rushed toward the peerless heavenly demon. If even Situ Feng fell, then how could their Vermilion Bird sect survive this catastrophe? For the survival of the Vermilion Bird sect, they were even willing to sacrifice themselves. Don't come over! Situ Feng roared, and a majestic holy flame soared into the sky, violently crashing into the peerless heavenly demon's body. Moreover, the explosion of the flames brought about a powerful gust of wind, forcing the disciples and elders back again. It was also at this moment that the peerless heavenly demon bathed in the holy flame vermilion bird, not taking a single step back. The sharp tail behind it was like a bolt of lightning, piercing through Situ Feng's head. Blood spread like fire. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to have fallen into a brief silence. Space surged. A young woman in a tight-fitting black Taoist robe appeared beside the fallen divine tree, and her pupils contracted with shock and incredulity upon seeing this. Purple flames were spreading. Sidu Feng's body had been reduced to ashes by the terrifying flames. Between the heavens and the earth, all that was left was the body of the two-winged heavenly demon, which had been burned to the point of melting. Its blood-stained tail slowly rose up, like a proud god, emitting purple flames, but it gave the cultivators present an infinite chill. "Our Grand Elder has fallen? No. That's impossible. The Grand Elder's vermilion bird spell techniques have reached perfection. He'll definitely be able to rise from the ashes." Right at this moment, the great Tao of heaven and earth suddenly wailed with grief. Countless crimson flaming feathers fell from the sky. All of the living beings present felt an indescribable sense of grief. A Tao integration stage super mighty figure had fallen. At this moment, all of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples had completely collapsed. The Grand Elder, who had protected the Vermilion Bird sect for countless years, had fallen. Some of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples burst into tears, and some of them even charged toward the heavenly demon without any fear of death. Even if they were going to lose, they were going to fight to the death. Charge! Avenge the Grand Elder! The flames of the Vermilion Bird shall never be extinguished. Flames erupted from all of the cultivators' bodies, and they either enveloped their bodies in flames or unleashed a series of powerful flame spell techniques toward the heavenly demon. The two-winged heavenly demon was instantly engulfed by countless flame spell technique. However, the Vermilion Bird sect cultivators didn't dare to slack off. Almost half of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples were attacking the heavenly demon. Lan Yen was also doing the same. She had even charged to the forefront of the battle formation and unleashed her most powerful spell techniques without any regard for her energy expenditure. However, accidents always came very quickly. Most of the cultivators didn't even have a chance to react before the heavenly demon tore through the spell technique bombardment and rushed toward Lan Yen. A sinister smile appeared on its slightly melted face as it slashed its huge blue sword down in a merciless manner. It wasn't targeting Lan Yen. It was just that Lan Yen was quite close to it and was quite powerful, so it decided to target her. At this moment, Lan Yen was completely unable to evade. In fact, she couldn't even defend herself. She could only look on as the huge blade drew closer and closer. The little girl who was once very fond of smiling finally broke into a smile at this moment. She didn't feel any fear toward this outcome. Instead, she felt that dying like this for the sake of the sect and the kingdom of the 9 states would be a worthy death. Perhaps this was what it truly felt like to face death with equanimity? However, it was also at this moment that a lanky figure suddenly appeared before her, and the blade in his hand lit up the entire night sky. Chapter 23:32. The two-winged heavenly demon's huge blue sword fell, and a silvery white light lit up heaven and earth as an extremely sharp saber projection crashed into the huge sword. Bam! The sword intent exploded with a bone-piercing sharpness. The two balls of blue and white energy clashed violently. In that instant, the terrifying force sent Lan Yan's body flying again. Her eyes widened as she stared at the beautiful figure that had just appeared on the battlefield, and she let loose a cry of surprise. "It's you, little Ling?" That's right, Lan Yan was good friends with Su Xiaolan, so she was naturally very familiar with this adorable little disciple of hers. It could be said that she had watched Yi Ling grow up. "It's me, big sister Lan Yan. Take everyone else and get away from here." Yi Ling struggled to defend herself against the heavenly demon's immense power. Even if she were to unleash all of her power, she would only be able to hold on with great difficulty. Lan Yan immediately retreated upon hearing this. Yi Ling's appearance gave the Vermilion Bird sect disciples and elders a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, at the center of the battle, the blue sword intent had already forced the white blade projection into a corner. When the extremely sharp dagger came into contact with the giant blue sword, sparks of energy burst out, and there was even a caw-caw-caw sound. There's a new prey. The scorched flesh on the heavenly demon's face began to congeal at the sight of Yi Ling, and a smile appeared on its face as the sword in its right hand slowly descended. At the same time, the huge blue sword in its left hand suddenly slashed toward Yi Ling's waist. Yi Ling's expression shifted drastically, and she abruptly slammed her dagger into the huge blue sword in order to quickly retreat. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful sword intent suddenly shot forth from the huge blue sword in her left hand, warping space and pulverizing everything in its path. Dark Dao Magnetic Shield. Yi Ling knew that she wouldn't be able to evade this spell technique, and she immediately positioned her dagger in front of her as her black divine Dao energy transformed into a circular shield. Boom! The blue sword projection crashed down violently. The power of the sword was completely beyond Yi Ling's imagination, and the dark Dao magnetic shield was shattered on the spot before the sword projection pierced through her body. Pfff. A massive gash appeared on Yi Ling's body, and she threw up a mouthful of blood before plummeting to the ground. Little Ling. Lan Yan's heart jolted upon seeing this. All of the other disciples of the Vermilion Bird sect also turned pale with fright. Yi Ling had been severely injured in just one move, and she was no match for the heavenly demon. At this moment, the heavenly demon flapped its wings and chased after Yi Ling, who was still breathing. As it raised its swords high into the air, holy flames suddenly erupted in the distance. What's so great about bullying a little girl? Your opponent is me. Zhu Xuzi roared angrily as he charged forward. He released his holy flame Vermilion Bird once again. Every time it flapped its wings, it would create an incomparably powerful flaming storm. The Vermilion Bird opened its beak, and the sacred flame turned into a breath that burned everything in its path, burning towards the heavenly demon. Since you're courting death, I'll kill you first. The peerless heavenly demon said calmly. With a single slash of its sword, the Vermilion Bird's sacred flame was cut into two halves. At this moment, Yi Ling had already fallen to the ground. She felt as if her entire body was being crazily destroyed by a force. Her meridians were in severe pain, and blood flowed from the sword wounds. Even her body couldn't help but tremble. This was an instinctive reaction to the powerful and terrifying force in the sky. Too powerful. This heavenly demon was unimaginably powerful. Regardless of whether it was in terms of strength, speed, or power, it was far superior to hers. She was no match for it. She was too weak, even though she was at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage and could unleash Dao integration stage power. She was still far too weak in the face of this heavenly demon. If things continued like this, the Vermilion Bird sect would be completely destroyed. Yi Ling crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. She swallowed an immortal pill and looked at the gloomy black ink that seemed to be able to crush everything in this world. There were countless eyes in the ink, and each pair of eyes represented a great terror. This was a world of despair. 50 great Daos, 49 heavenly births. Man escapes. One master told me that no matter how hopeless the situation is, I must never give up hope. Yi Ling gripped the dagger in her hand tightly and pursed her blood-stained lip. A look of determination gradually appeared in her eyes. Man can create miracles, and so can I. Let's give it a try. What if I succeed? She took a deep breath. Heaven and earth seemed to have fallen completely silent at this moment. The terrifying aura of the heavenly demon had disappeared. The sounds of battle between the Vermilion Bird sect disciples and elders and the heavenly demons had disappeared. The grief and rage of the destruction of the heavens had disappeared. Yi Ling untied her ponytail, and her long, black hair danced in the wind. She stood on the cracked ground of the battlefield, and the vital energy within a radius of over 5,000 kilometers suddenly formed a vortex before converging toward her body. Lightning seemed to be crackling in the sky as a dull rumbling sound erupted. All of the mighty figures present could sense that something was amiss. What's going on? Why is the flow of vital energy changing? The lightning in the sky seems to have been unleashed by the heavenly Tao. Could it be all of the mighty figures turned in unison toward the black-robed young woman with incredulity and absurdity on their faces? No way, Yi Ling of the 4-9 Immortal Sect is going to transcend her tribulation? All of the cultivators of the Vermilion Bird Sect were astonished. However, Yi Ling had completely broken through her shackles at this moment. Boom! A gargantuan aura erupted into the sky. This aura was extremely powerful, and it even punctured a massive hole in the ink-like, viscous sky above. The dark shadow assassination divine Tao erupted from her body, casting a layer of shadows over the entire sky and earth. She was like the ruler of the shadows, standing at the very center. Her hair was as black as ink, and her saber projection was as bright as silver. A lethal aura emanated from her body, and it was becoming more and more terrifying. Vital energy within a radius of several thousand kilometers surged into her body in a frenzy. At this moment, all of the cultivators present confirmed that Yi Ling really was going to progress to the Tao integration stage. Master and Lin had once told her that Yi Ling wasn't ready yet, so she couldn't progress too quickly. Her master's wife had also told her that her shadow divine Tao still needed to be perfected. If she was too hasty, she could die during the Tao integration stage. However, Yi Ling knew that she couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't defeat the heavenly demon, so she could only transcend her tribulation. At this moment, she decided that she was going to fight with everything she had. She was going to progress to the Tao integration stage. That was the only way they could find a chance to win this battle. Tao integration stage tribulations are ever-changing. I wonder what my tribulation is going to be like. Yi Ling was feeling a little uneasy. Even though all of the 4-9 Immortal Sect cultivators had successfully transcended their tribulations, the mortality rate for Tao integration stage tribulations was actually quite high. Countless prodigies at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage had perished during their Tao integration stage tribulations, and that was even when they were fully prepared. However, Yi Ling didn't seem to be prepared for this at all. Chapter 2333. Vital energy surged for thousands of miles. This scale could be said to be unprecedented and spectacular. The sharp aura that blasted a hole in the heavenly Tao calamity caused countless cultivators to be shocked. The commotion was too strong, wasn't it? It could even affect the heavenly Tao calamity. Is the number 1 disciple sister of the 4-9 Immortal Sect really going to transcend her tribulation to the Tao integration stage? Oh my God, isn't she just over 100 years old? How can there be such a monstrous person in this world? Why not? Aren't War God and Lin and the Divine Phoenix Maiden of the 4-9 Immortal Sect such freaks? Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Just as everyone was rejoicing, a worried expression appeared on Elder Zhu Yuanzhou's face. Will Yi Ling be able to transcend her tribulation at this time? You should know that the heavenly Tao is at the critical moment of breaking the heavens. The impact will be huge, right? His worry was not without reason. The heavenly Tao was currently in an extremely unstable state, and no one knew what would happen if Yi Ling were to transcend her tribulation at a time like this. If there were any changes that greatly affected her, no matter how monstrous and powerful she was, she could still die. After all, there could be no mistakes when it came to transcending the tribulation. Yi Ling was clearly aware of this, but she still did it anyway. Hope reignited in the hearts of the Vermilion Bird Sect cultivators upon seeing this. If she successfully transcends her tribulation, then we'll have 2 Tao integration stage super mighty figures, and we might be able to win this battle. I don't think so. Our Grand Elder is a veteran Tao integration stage super mighty figure, yet even he and our sect leader were unable to subdue that heavenly demon. Yi Ling has successfully transcended her tribulation, but she's only a rookie Tao integration stage super mighty figure at most. Does she really have a chance? Some disciples were full of confidence, while others were still quite worried. However, no matter who it was, they were all praying for Yiling, and they also took the initiative to eliminate the heavenly demons that wanted to approach Yiling first. Peerless Sky Demon and Zhu Shuza, who were fighting, also noticed the situation over there. Going through the tribulation at this time? You're courting death, the heavenly demon said calmly, as if he had seen through everything and was too lazy to care about the other party. It turned its gaze toward the struggling Zhu Shuza again. As long as it killed Zhu Shuza, this top-rate sect of the Kingdom of the Nine States would undoubtedly be destroyed. Therefore, it was better to kill Zhu Shuza first. Boom! Lightning suddenly struck down from the sky. The lightning was hazy and indeterminate in shape. It was dark black with a hint of purple, and it actually possessed an extremely terrifying might of lightning as it slashed the ink firmament in an area of 50 kilometers into nothingness. As it descended, it drew out a horrifying crack in space. Almost everyone cried out in alarm. This was because the lightning bolt was aimed at the girl who was undergoing the tribulation. No one would have thought that Yiling's Tao integration stage tribulation would be a lightning tribulation, and no one would have thought that the lightning would be so terrifying. Not only were the return to void stage mighty figures terrified, even the Tao integration stage super mighty figure Zhu Shuza's hair stood on end in horror and horror. This lightning should not belong to this world. This was the Genesis lightning, the Chaos Divine lightning. This lightning would only appear when a cultivator at the Tao integration pinnacle stage progressed from the God of Creation stage. Everyone was dumbfounded. In that instant, Yiling felt as if everything between heaven and earth had become extremely clear. The collapsing sky, the insanity of the heavenly demons, the menacing divine lightning, everything slowed down. She could clearly sense that if the Chaos Divine lightning struck her in its entirety, she would be reduced to ashes. However, she didn't complain about the unfairness of the heavenly Tao. She didn't complain about the chaotic divine lightning that only cultivators at the Tao integration pinnacle stage were facing. Yiling straightened her slender body and leaped into the air. The power of the shadow assassination divine Tao was completely unleashed, and her dagger slashed down upon the descending chaotic divine lightning with a frosty light that pierced through the heavens. The collapsing sky, the apocalyptic lightning, and the fearless young girl who had leaped into the air with a dazzling, frosty light. Everyone's eyes widened in that instant. Boom! A thunderous explosion erupted, and everyone felt like their eardrums were about to explode. The chaotic divine lightning exploded. The terrifying might of the lightning had all of the heavenly demons within a radius of over 500 kilometers shuddering in fear. The center of the lightning had already been reduced to a ball of destructive lightning. Little Ling. Tears welled up in Lan Yan's eyes as she stared blankly at the ball of lightning. Her heart throbbed with pain. Such an adorable and thoughtful little girl had fallen to the chaotic divine lightning. If Enlin and Su Xiaolan were to learn of this, how sad would they be? A sense of sorrow welled up in everyone's hearts. They had pinned their hopes on Yiling, thinking that she might be able to turn the situation around if she successfully transcended her tribulation. Who would have thought that her tribulation would be so unreasonable? Even a Tao integration pinnacle stage cultivator would be terrified of a lightning tribulation. How were they supposed to survive this? The heavens want our vermilion bird sect to perish. Tears streamed down some of the elders' faces. An elder suddenly let loose a loud cry. No. Look, what's that? All of the vermilion bird sect disciples looked toward the ball of lightning to discover that there was a young girl standing silently within it. She was completely unscathed. Some of the disciples rubbed their eyes, thinking that their eyes were playing tricks on them. At this moment, the ball of lightning had already dissipated, and the beautiful young girl's features became even clearer. Her skin was fair and translucent, and her eyes were bright and clear, making her appear even more eye-catching under the night sky. The silver dagger in her hand was surrounded by a hazy, formless, and extremely terrifying divine thunder. As it swam, it released strands of lightning that merged into her body. It was as if the divine thunder was afraid that she would not be able to withstand it if she absorbed too much, so the speed at which it was released was very, very slow. All of the Vermilion Bird sect cultivators were dumbstruck upon seeing this. What was going on? Yi Ling was also a little dumbstruck. She had thought that she was going to die for sure. Even though she had high aspirations and refused to admit defeat, she couldn't think of any way to defend herself against such terrifying divine lightning. However, the chaotic divine lightning seemed to have thought of a way for her. The chaotic divine lightning was like a dragon or a snake as it revolved around her divine tool, slowly unleashing its terrifying lightning might, thereby allowing her body to undergo a stable and peaceful transformation. Yi Ling suddenly thought back to when she was transcending her tribulation to the return to void stage. Her tribulation lightning had also been like this, and it had been a very comfortable massage. After that, her cultivation base had progressed. Who would have thought that her tribulation lightning would also be this comfortable? An expression of elation appeared on Yi Ling's face. Her understanding of the Tao of shadow assassination was becoming more and more profound, and her divine Tao was becoming more and more complete. Furthermore, after being tempered by the chaotic divine lightning, her body had become even more powerful. In fact, she was even more powerful than a normal Tao integration stage super mighty figure. Right at this moment, all of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples suddenly let loose cries of surprise. Yi Ling turned toward the heavenly demon to discover that one of Zhu Xu's arms had already been sliced off by the heavenly demon's blue sword, and the heavenly demon's sword was descending upon Zhu Xu's head. Yi Ling was still transcending her tribulation, and she was extremely anxious upon seeing this. However, a bold idea suddenly occurred to her when she saw the chaotic divine lightning revolving around her dagger. Chapter 23:34. The peerless heavenly demon cut off Zhu Xu's arm with one slash. Another slash followed. Dark blue sword chi pierced through the sky and fell toward Zhu Xu's head. The dense killing intent condensed and even tore a huge crack in the black ink in the sky. Zhu Xuza crushed the last jade pendant he had. The sacred beast Vermilion Bird's blood was released and formed an indestructible blood shield. Boom! The huge sword struck the blood shield. The domineering and strange blue sword chi was very powerful, but it couldn't break the blood shield. Boom! When the blood shield lost its energy, it cracked. Zhu Xuza had already increased the distance between them. It's just a meaningless struggle. The peerless heavenly demon didn't have much expression on its face after its attack failed. It flapped its wings and quickly approached Zhu Xuza again. One after another, holy fire spells came, but the peerless heavenly demon easily slashed them apart. Zhu Xuza looked at the approaching peerless heavenly demon and felt a sense of helplessness. That suffocating aura and invincible power made him unable to fight or block it. At this moment, the peerless heavenly demon's huge sword slashed down again. Zhu Xuza had nothing left to protect himself. Looking at the increasingly large blade in his field of vision, he finally knew that he was facing death. There was a reluctance in his eyes. He still wanted to struggle, but the sword force had sealed all his movements. At this moment, he had nowhere to run. Suddenly, a shadow appeared and a cold light appeared. A girl jumped out from the shadow and stood in front of Zhu Xuza. She held a sharp blade in her hand and the cold light shone for 3,000 miles. Even the peerless heavenly demon was almost blinded by this cold light. That terrifying killing intent caused the power around its body to solidify. What kind of killing intent was this? It was so dense that it could affect the laws of heaven and earth? The peerless heavenly demon's expression changed drastically for the first time. The huge sword in its hand slashed down, but it hit the cold light. The power of both sides exploded again. It saw the girl in front of it clearly. It was the girl it had defeated in one move. A similar scene. The peerless heavenly demon and Yi Ling clashed. But this time, the peerless heavenly demon felt an extremely terrifying power coming from the sword. It was no longer able to send the girl flying. The peerless heavenly demon was a little confused. Wasn't this woman transcending tribulation? How could she still run over to fight? Transcending the tribulation was a life-threatening situation, yet this person was still able to rush over and slash at it. If it were any other transcending tribulation cultivator, they would have died 100 times over. Then, it discovered something even weirder. It discovered that the girl's divine artifact dagger was surrounded by some kind of hazy purple lightning with a hint of black. That lightning gave it a very dangerous feeling. What is this? The peerless heavenly demon's eyes narrowed. Make a guess. Yi Ling's lips curled up into a faint smile. The purplish-black lightning on the dagger suddenly spread along the huge blue sword, instantly spreading to the peerless heavenly demon's body. The destructive lightning exploded, destroying everything on its body. Ah! The peerless heavenly demon's body was suddenly torn apart by the terrifying lightning. The terrifying energy caused it to scream miserably. This was legendary lightning that could wound even gods of creation. This was divine lightning that was born from chaos and transcended beyond heaven and earth. It was far more fearsome than the attacks of all Tao integration stage super mighty figures. When Yi Ling saw this terrifying power revolving around her divine tool, the bold idea of using the chaotic divine lightning on her sword to slay the peerless heavenly demon appeared in her mind. Die! Yi Ling let loose a clear cry as a cold light erupted from the dagger in her hand, and all of the chaotic divine lightning on it was transferred to the peerless heavenly demon without any reservation. The lightning of annihilation pierced through the heavenly demon's body like a slithering dragon, blasting a few massive holes into its wings. The lightning of annihilation was imbued with extremely powerful energy, and its flesh and blood began to boil and explode in an even more insane manner than a scorching inferno. Boom! The lightning of annihilation exploded. Even Yi Ling was knocked flying by the shockwave. She finally stabilized her body with great difficulty before turning toward the center of the explosion with a nervous expression. All of the other cultivators were also stunned by Yi Ling's insane performance, and they didn't even have time to exclaim in admiration as they also stared at the center of the explosion with bated breath. The lightning dissipated, and a charred black body of the heavenly demon appeared in the air. There wasn't a single part of its body that wasn't damaged. Its wings were in tatters, black ink was dripping from its body, and there was a massive hole in its head. Using the power of tribulation transcendence to slay a powerful enemy. I kneel to Big Boss Yi Ling. So this is tribulation transcendence? I've never seen anything like this before. This is definitely an epic tribulation transcendence that will be recorded in the annals of Tai Chu continent history. Did she succeed? It's already been reduced to such a sorry state. There's no way it can survive, right? Let's go and stab it a few more times to burn it more thoroughly. Alright. A few Return to Void stage elders unleash terrifying flame spell techniques toward the heavenly demon. Right at this moment, a blue halo of light suddenly appeared around the heavenly demon's body, keeping all of their spell techniques at bay. Phew! A long and deep exhalation sounded. The temperature between heaven and earth dropped by a few degrees at that moment. Yi Ling's eyes trembled slightly as she gripped her dagger tightly. It's not dead. The chaotic divine lightning that could insta-kill even Tao integration stage super mighty figures was unable to kill this heavenly demon. Very good. To think that such a terrifying human can even take advantage of Tao integration stage tribulations. I can't let you live. A sinister smile appeared on the heavenly demon's face as the purple flames on its tail transformed into dragon-shaped flames that revolved around its two huge blue swords, setting those two swords ablaze. With lethal flames. It held two huge swords that were burning with purple flames in its hands, and its tattered wings stretched out even larger. A terrifying aura that belonged to it burst forth, and it even caused an energy tide within a radius of several thousand miles. It was like a peerless demon, and all living beings in the world were terrified. Hee, that move of yours that borrowed the thunder from outer space to attack me was indeed very strong. However, your weapon no longer has any thunderbolt. What are you going to use to fight me now? The heavenly demon was becoming more and more talkative toward this human who had managed to wound it, as if it wanted to see despair in his eyes. Zhu Shuzi flew over to Yi Ling's side. I'll hold it off. You've already done enough for us, so hurry up and run. This is a battle for the Vermilion Bird sect, so leave the rest to us. Yi Ling glanced at the wounded man beside her. She knew that Zhu Shuzi couldn't bear to see her die here, but she didn't move. Instead, she turned toward the heavenly demon with a dainty smile. My weapons don't have lightning anymore? You're right, but what's going to happen next is different. Yi Ling raised her dagger high into the air, and her clear voice reverberated throughout heaven and earth. Lightning, come! Boom! Chaotic divine lightning tore through the heavens and fell upon Yi Ling's dagger again. The dazzling lightning descended upon the world like a bird returning to its nest. Dance of the Dragon and Snake. Chapter 23:35. Her blade was imbued with chaotic lightning. At this moment, Yi Ling's beauty once again stunned the world. All of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples were dumbstruck as they stared at the young woman in the distance. They felt like she was extremely dazzling, but at the same time, they also felt an indescribable sense of security. The sinister smile on the heavenly demon's face gradually congealed as it stared at the chaotic divine lightning in the young woman's eyes, as if it had seen a ghost. Never would it have thought that this young woman would be able to summon lightning of this caliber. She just had to shout for lightning and it really came? Could it be that this young woman was the daughter of the heavenly Tao? The heavenly demon looked up into the sky with a pained expression. It was clearly the representative of the heavenly Tao, so why was the heavenly Tao helping this young woman instead? No one could answer its question. The young woman's body arched slightly, and she suddenly closed in on the heavenly demon like a blur as her killing intent froze heaven and earth within a radius of 50 kilometers. Shadow murder, chaotic divine lightning slash. The sword to send you safely on your way was imbued with chaotic divine lightning, and it tore through space and all forms of energy as it slashed down toward the heavenly demon's head. The heavenly demon did not cower in the face of the attack that had once severely wounded it. Instead, it took the initiative to meet the attack head-on. The purple flame swords in its hands slashed down with unstoppable force, and the purple flames pounced toward Yi Ling before the swords even arrived. The heavenly demon knew that the chaotic divine lightning on Yi Ling's dagger had a spreading effect. It was exactly because of this that it decided to strike first and burn the young woman to death with its destructive purple flames. That way, even if the young woman could control chaotic divine lightning, she wouldn't be able to do anything. The heavenly demon was very confident in its ability to kill Sidu Feng with its destructive purple flames. This time, its opponent was a young woman who had yet to truly transcend her tribulation, so she definitely wouldn't be able to last even a second under its destructive purple flames. In the face of the oncoming purple flames, there was no fear on Yi Ling's face at all. Her lips parted slightly as she uttered, "Divine lightning wall." A portion of the lightning on the dagger instantly formed a lightning barrier in front of her, reducing all of the oncoming purple flames into a chaotic state. How could this be? The heavenly demon was dumbstruck. At this moment, the two swords had already descended at the same time, slashing at the silver-white dagger that had condensed into a blade of light. Boundless and terrifying energy once again poured out. The weapons collided again. The chaos divine lightning began to spread along the two swords to the heavenly demon's body. Ah! The peerless heavenly demon's body was once again ravaged by the primal chaos divine lightning. His body twisted and was riddled with holes. Yi Ling was once again sent flying by her own power. She steadied herself in the air and found that her strength did not weaken. Instead, it was getting stronger. Under the continuous tempering of the chaos divine lightning, his body had already undergone some kind of transformation. Under his fair and translucent skin, there was a kind of transcendent aura. Fighting and breaking through at the same time seemed to be able to better adapt to the new realm. Yi-Ling finally heaved a sigh of relief, and she pointed her dagger up into the sky again as a crisp, pleasant voice sounded, "Lightning, come." Rumble. Chaotic divine lightning fell from the sky and gathered on the girl's dagger again. Wisps of divine lightning frantically refined the young girl's body, divine soul, and divine Tao. Her divine Tao was close to perfection. All of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples, elders, and even the sect leader were completely dumbstruck. This young girl was using the chaotic divine lightning as her own power. Not only was there no limit to the number of times she could unleash it, but she could also change its form. For some reason, she reminds me of a certain person. I also think of that man. We're definitely thinking of the same person. That's right, he's Tamer of Divine Lightning. Heavenly God of King Lightning. The two elders suddenly uttered different terms of address. They were talking about the same person. The two elders quickly alleviated the awkwardness in their hearts. Anlin was able to control Divine Lightning and even keep it as his pet. This was already a legendary feat on the Taichu continent. Now, Yi-Ling was also able to control Divine Lightning, and even the most powerful chaotic Divine Lightning was taking extra care of her in case it accidentally struck her to death. This was the first time they had ever witnessed such an extraordinary scene. In the past, Anlin was able to control Golden Void Lightning. Now, Yi-Ling was able to control chaotic Divine Lightning. Should I say, as expected of master and disciple? Yi-Ling didn't give the heavenly demon a chance to catch its breath as she charged toward it again. The peerless heavenly demon was already charred on the outside and charred on the inside. Seeing Yi-Ling pouncing towards it again, its body couldn't help but tremble. Without thinking, it brandished the huge sword in its hand and drew out an extremely powerful purple flame sword beam. It didn't choose to engage in close-quarters combat with Yi-Ling. Instead, it chose to attack from afar. As long as its attack was powerful enough and had a large enough area of effect, Yi-Ling wouldn't be able to touch it. The purple flaming sword projection swept through heaven and earth, dyeing the entire heaven and earth a vast expanse of purple. This was an energy that Yi-Ling definitely wouldn't have been able to withstand in the past. However, she was currently transcending her tribulation, and she was becoming more and more powerful. Shadow Swallow Slash. The dagger in her hand slashed through the purple flaming sword projection, leaving a black line imbued with pure killing intent in its wake. This slash was like a black line that couldn't contain Yi-Ling. However, in the next instant, Yi-Ling transformed into a shadow swallow and merged into the black line. When the black line pierced through the purple flaming sword projection and reached the heavenly demon, Yi-Ling's body suddenly leaped out of the black line, and right before the heavenly demon's astonished eyes, she stabbed her dagger toward the heavenly demon's body without any hesitation. The peerless demonic gigantic sword was lifted up, blocking his head. Bam! A silvery white killing light flashed, and lightning exploded. The dagger struck the heavenly demon's huge sword. Before the lightning could spread, the heavenly demon's tail stinger pierced toward Yi-Ling's head at an even faster speed than the lightning. A crazed expression appeared on its face as it roared, "Die!" In that instant, Yi-Ling's slender waist bent at an exaggerated angle, and she leaned back to evade the sneak attack by a hair's breadth. At the same time, lightning erupted from the blade of the heavenly demon's sword. Boom! Ah! The heavenly demon let loose another blood-curdling wail. Yi-Ling was knocked flying by the shockwaves, and she stabbed her dagger toward the sky again. Lightning, come! Boom! The dagger in Yi-Ling's hand was like a lightning rod, unleashing a bolt of lightning upon the heavenly demon. You want to sneak attack me again? Don't you know that my divine Tao is shadow assassination? Yi Ling stared at the peerless heavenly demon, and chaotic lightning erupted from her dagger as she stabbed forward once again. The heavenly demon didn't even have a chance to recover from its injuries before the nightmarish dagger flew toward it again. Bam! The huge sword clashed with the dagger again. Yi Ling chose to stab toward the heavenly demon's head again, but her dagger was blocked by the heavenly demon's huge sword. It was also at this moment that a burst of excitement erupted from within her body. Thump! Her heart thumped violently, and it was as if her entire life had been elevated to a higher level. She had never been complete. She had never been perfect. Her divine Tao appeared in the sky, manifesting into all things as killing intent filled the entire sky. Her divine Tao phenomenon encompassed heaven and earth, and her shadow assassination divine Tao was completely acknowledged by the great Tao of heaven and earth. In that instant, Yi Ling had truly progressed to the Tao integration stage. Chapter 2336. The heavenly demon had also detected all of this. The young woman's aura and power had suddenly become so much more powerful, and her power of the divine Tao had undergone a complete transformation. If it still couldn't detect this, then it would be an idiot. The heavenly demon was initially very shocked. However, a joyful smile appeared on its face as it thought about it. What did Yi Ling's successful tribulation transcendence represent? Did it represent that she had become more powerful? No, it didn't matter that she had become more powerful. It wouldn't panic even if she became a Tao integration intermediate stage or Tao integration final stage cultivator. It was afraid of the chaotic divine lightning. If Yi Ling successfully transcended her tribulation, then she wouldn't be struck by the chaotic divine lightning anymore. Wouldn't she lose the ability to control the chaotic divine lightning? That was the main point. Without the chaotic divine lightning, it could take on 10 of Yi Ling. The heavenly demon smiled with elation. Right at this moment, a crisp crack suddenly erupted. Kacha, the heavenly demon, discovered that a large number of cracks had appeared on its huge blue sword where the dagger had struck it, and the lightning flashing from the dagger was slowly penetrating into its body. How could this be? Why isn't the chaotic divine lightning following the sword to strike me? The heavenly demon's expression suddenly shifted drastically. Because there's no need to. Yi Ling's eyes suddenly became extremely sharp, and the shadow assassination divine Tao within her body combined perfectly with the chaotic divine lightning on the dagger, elevating its sharpness to the extreme once again. Bam! The huge blue sword suddenly shattered down the middle. The young woman stabbed the lightning shadow blade into the heavenly demon's head right before its horrified eyes. Lightning screeched through the air as the blade pierced through the air for over 1,000 kilometers. Error! The heavenly demon wriggled its mouth with great difficulty as lightning flowed through its wound and wreaked havoc within its body. It never would have thought that Yi Ling's complete divine Tao would be able to unleash such devastating power after fusing with the chaotic divine lightning. It's over. The dagger in Yi Ling's hand glowed with a powerful silvery white light as it slashed down viciously. The peerless heavenly demon's body was directly sliced into two by the dagger from the head to the head. The heavenly demon had thought that it would retaliate after Yi Ling successfully transcended her tribulation, but it didn't think that it would be the end of its life. Shadow kill, Hell Lotus. The dagger in Yi Ling's hand slashed through the air toward the two halves of the peerless heavenly demon, and the saber projections converged to form a massive black and purple lotus flower that completely enveloped the peerless heavenly demon's body. In the next moment, the peerless heavenly demon's eyes bulged out. Countless bloody scars appeared on its body, increasing in number. Finally, its body wriggled violently, turning into countless tiny pieces of flesh. The tiny pieces of flesh were chopped into even tinier existences. Finally, they were chopped into indistinguishable particles and were completely swallowed by the lotus flower. When the instant lotus disappeared, there was no trace of the heavenly demon in front of Yi Ling. Or rather, the heavenly demon had been slain by her. The terrifying aura dissipated. The world fell into silence. Everyone stared blankly at the scene in front of them, unable to come back to their senses until now. The insufferably arrogant heavenly demon that brought nightmares to the Vermilion Bird sect was slain so easily by the young woman before them? The inky black mass in the sky was receding at a rate discernible to the naked eye. The destructive aura hadn't completely dissipated, but it had diminished significantly. Some people were even able to raise their heads to see the stars in the sky. As it turned out, the Vermilion Bird sect had survived this most difficult of tribulations. She did it. She really did it. Lan Yen pursed her lips as she looked at the elegant young girl standing alone in the void. Tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Zhu Xiuza sighed with emotion. And Lin Shure has found a good disciple. At this moment, all of the disciples and elders of the Vermilion Bird sect were chanting Yi Ling's name in gratitude for everything she had done for the sect. After this battle, Yi Ling had truly become the hero of the Vermilion Bird sect. Their cheers were like a tidal wave. Yi Ling stood silently in the sky, and her Taoist robe was stained with blood. There was also a sword-intent gash on her face, which ruined her overall beauty, but she didn't seem to care. She still held onto the dagger and Lin had given her tightly in her hand as she looked toward the western sky with her clear eyes. Master, Ling did not disappoint you. Ling has defended the Vermilion Bird sect for you, she murmured to herself in a low voice. At this moment, all of the other human cities in the Kingdom of the Nine States were also erupting with battle intent, and earth-shattering battles were taking place at all major intersections. All of the cultivators were doing their best to fight against this calamity. This was protection, but it was also survival. No human could survive this calamity. On another massive city in the Baihua state, Phoenix Little Huang and the great empress of the Snow tribe had successfully slain a massive heavenly demon with the head of a cow, thereby protecting tens of millions of human residents. Within the territory of the Greenwood imperial family in the Kingdom of the Nine States, the heavenly demons swept through the sky. All of the imperial cultivators were fighting with all their might, but the sect protection formation was already on the brink of collapse. Su Qianyun controlled the moonlight disk to shuttle through the ranks of the heavenly demons, and she was able to slay a heavenly demon with each and every strike she made. She had already become one of the most powerful beings in the Greenwood imperial family, and she shouldered the heavy responsibility of protecting the Greenwood imperial family. Professor Yang opened the Greenwood cannon that he had been secretly researching for a long time and fired it into the sky. A golden flower of destruction exploded in the sky, directly blowing up an extremely huge and powerful heavenly demon into ashes. In the ancient void state, many powerful disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect descended upon the world to save the world. Sect leader Lu Mingxian and Dongfang Zhuangshi joined forces to slay the heavenly double-headed dragon heavenly demon at the Heavenly Sword sect. In the Thunder state, the celestial Dharch of the Celestial Court unleashed his invincible combat prowess to slay two heavenly demons that were trying to attack the Celestial Court. In the Heavenly River state, moonlight shone down upon Flaming River City. Chang'e danced in the sky, and a bright white moon hung high in the sky. However many heavenly demons descended, they were purified into balls of pure Yin water by the peculiar power of the moonlight. This was the most peaceful and tranquil supercity. Countless residents knelt down in gratitude toward the breathtaking figure in the sky. In the gem state Shenong City, Ao Xiaowu and Emperor Qing Hua were being chased by a heavenly demon, and they were forced to retreat into the wilderness outside of Shenong City, in the Stone Flower Prefecture of the Stone Dragon State. This place had become a heavenly demon storm, and heavenly demons fell like rain. Emperor Ziwei, Emperor Tianhuang, and war god Erlang were all caught up in an arduous battle. Everywhere, the battle was far from ceasing. They didn't know how long this tribulation was going to last. All they knew was that the humans they had to protect were right beside them, and all they could do was continue to fight. At this moment, at the 4-9 Immortal Sect base in the Purple Star State, Bai Ling looked at one spatial node after another in the sky above the kingdom of the 9 states, and she made frantic calculations. Chen Chen and Cyril were still unable to break the heavenly demon tribulation, and this made Bai Ling more and more uneasy. All of a sudden, she turned her gaze toward the second largest human settlement, the Buddhist kingdom of the West, and her pupils contracted slightly. Chapter 23:37. Above the heaven-crushing glazed palace in the Purple Star ruins, countless heavenly demons were descending, colliding with the extremely powerful demonic chi before being pulverized into nothingness by the demonic chi. 6 peerless heavenly demons formed a formation and attacked Cyril, but Cyril was able to instantly slay all 6 of them with a single slash of his sword. In front of Cyril, who was at the pinnacle of the God of Creation stage, there was no tangible existence that could rival him. He was at the pinnacle of the God of Creation stage, and he could look down on all beings in this world. This heavenly demon tribulation is virtually endless. If this continues, countless lives will be lost. We have to get rid of this tribulation as soon as possible, Cyril said with a grim expression. He was not afraid that the Sky Devils would attack him, but he was afraid that the Sky Devils would attack other human beings, which would be an irreversible disaster. Chen Chen was also anxious. He had even used the Eye of the Universe to observe this calamity, but he still couldn't find a way out. Could it be that the key to overcoming this calamity isn't in the Purple Star ruins? Chen Chen frowned. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. If the crux really wasn't in the Purple Star ruins, then that would be terrifying. They couldn't move too far away, so who would be able to end this heavenly Tao tribulation? This was equivalent to a suicide question. Although this question could be solved, those who could solve it were trapped in a cage, unable to solve it. Therefore, this question could not be solved. Chen Chen activated his Eye of the Universe, and countless realms and stars flashed past his eyes as he looked toward the direction of the kingdom of the 9 states. Strangely enough, the sky over there was also filled with tribulations, but there was no critical point to break through. He's not in the 9 states? Could it be? Chen Chen continued to shift his gaze westward, and when his gaze landed on the Buddhist nation in the west, his eyes finally narrowed, and a look of astonishment appeared on his face. How could it be in the Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss? Cyril's expression also changed upon hearing this news. Western Paradise? The second largest human gathering point? The Eastern 9 states and the Western Paradise were the strongest places in the human cultivation civilization. In more detail, the kingdom of the 9 states was even more powerful than the Western Paradise. Chen Chen and Cyril had initially thought that the heaven-crushing sect would be the main target of the heavenly demon tribulation. However, they didn't expect that the heavenly demon tribulation would target the Western Paradise instead. Picking on pushovers? Or should he start with the simplest method, based on the principle of killing the most humans? Chen Chen realized that he couldn't understand what the heavenly Tao was thinking. However, what was certain was that the Buddhist kingdom of the West was about to face the most terrifying calamity in its history. After all, the Buddhist kingdom of the West was far too weak, and it was on a completely different level compared to the kingdom of the 9 states, where the 4-9 Immortal sect was stationed. In the far west of the Tai Chu continent, there was a pure land of bliss. The lives of every monk here were very pure and beautiful. This was the place with the most benefits, and it was also the place where human kindness was displayed to the extreme. But at this moment the bliss was gone. Black cracks appeared in the cracked sky, tearing apart the Buddhist light that filled the sky. Huge blobs of black ink filled with eyes dripped down from the sky. Then, they morphed into monsters with powerful auras and slaughtered the monks before them. These were demons that even the Buddhist light was unable to save. There was only destruction and slaughter in their eyes, so the monks could only pick up their weapons and fight them. Unfortunately, the heavenly demons were far more powerful than the monk. Even the most ordinary heavenly demon possessed spirit-nurturing stage power. In the top-rate cities of the Buddhist kingdom of the West, there were even large numbers of soul formation stage and return to void stage heavenly demons active. Peerless heavenly demons were unstoppable in this place. Each and every one of their attacks could plunge a prosperous city into a hellish scene. Blood, wails, and blood-curdling cries filled heaven and earth. Hundreds of millions of civilians were reduced to meat waiting to be slaughtered. Even the powerful bodhisattvas and Buddhas were unable to protect themselves. All of a sudden, the great Tao of heaven and earth wailed with grief. A Tao integration stage Super Buddha had fallen, and heaven and earth mourned. Our Maitreya Buddha has fallen. No. Impossible. He's our future. How could this be? Is our pure land of bliss going to be destroyed? Tears streamed down some of the monks' faces as they looked at the phenomena taking place. Devastating purple flames rained down from the sky, threatening to incinerate even the phenomena of the fallen Buddha. 3 peerless heavenly demons spread open their massive wings, and cruel smiles appeared on their faces as they looked at the cracked immortal golden body. The top-rate Buddha within it had already lost all signs of life. One of the peerless heavenly demons raised its blood-stained scythe high into the air as its voice reverberated throughout heaven and earth. The most powerful being of the Buddhist kingdom has fallen. Now we can begin the true slaughter. Leave all the monks and all the humans alive. All of the heavenly demons became excited and fanatical upon hearing this. They roared and roared as they destroyed the lives before them in even more fearsome forms. The sky had already become a vast expanse of darkness, and it was getting lower and lower, as if it were going to crush and annihilate all of the living beings within the realm. In contrast to the kingdom of the 9 states and the purple star ruins, a massive black hole had appeared in the core region of the Buddhist kingdom of the West. This black hole seemed to be the lair of the heavenly demons, and countless heavenly demons flew out from within like a swarm of locusts. Among them were a large number of gigantic heavenly demons, as well as a certain number of peerless heavenly demons. This was a true calamity, an unstoppable calamity. If things continued like this, the once glorious Western paradise would be completely annihilated in less than 15 minutes. Sigh. The place where humans once lived the happiest is about to become a living hell. The world enlightened being shook his head and sighed with emotion as he surveyed the scene before him. He was definitely a neutral being, and even though he was looking at this living hell, he didn't have any thoughts of intervening. Such a massive number of heavenly demons. From the looks of it, there are even more heavenly demons than there are in the kingdom of the 9 states. Even if the Buddhist kingdom of the West were to double their power, they still wouldn't be a match for them. The world enlightened being shook his head as he analyzed the situation. He was clearly of the opinion that the Buddhist kingdom of the West was already beyond saving. However, right at this moment, his expression suddenly faltered. Then, he looked at the ground beneath the black hole in the core region of the Buddhist kingdom, and a brilliant light gradually erupted from his eyes. This is when the heavenly demons danced wildly, and when the gods and Buddhas fell, when the world collapsed, and when paradise transformed into a living hell. All of a sudden, a massive golden swastika symbol appeared on the surface of the earth. The swastika Buddhist seal extended for tens of thousands of kilometers, and the power of great benevolence and morality surged through the entire universe and shook the heavens and earth. Boom! A boundless golden light burst forth from the ground and soared into the clouds, stirring the heavens, and annihilating all the ink-colored matter in the sky. In an extremely violent manner, the heavens and earth were transformed into a golden Buddhist light. A voice that was soothing to all living beings began to spread throughout heaven and earth. Namo Amitabha. Chapter 23:38. When the heavenly demons in the sky heard this voice, they all fell down like rain as if they had suffered some kind of heavy blow. A single Buddhist voice cleansed away all evil spirits and monsters. The monks and Buddhas of the Western Buddhist kingdom, who were trapped in a hellish scene, were confused at first when they heard the Buddhist voice. Then, they instinctively felt calm, no longer afraid or desperate, as if the bliss and hope were right in front of them. What happened? Why did this terrifying sky suddenly turn golden? The voice sounds so comfortable. Not only that, but it also made tens of thousands of heavenly demons fall with a single word. Could this be a Buddhist voice that contains supreme Buddhist principles? Look, the golden light rising from the ground is starting to change its shape. When the monks saw the sky suddenly change color, they could not contain their excitement. Although they did not know where this powerful power came from, they knew that this power belonged to their Buddhism. This was the hope of the Western Buddhist kingdom. Inside the black hole in the heavenly demon tribe's lair. When the 5 peerless heavenly demons saw the giant swastika symbol on the ground expanding with their lair as the center, they immediately felt that something was wrong. "Destroy it," one of the peerless heavenly demons said. "Roar, kill." Dozens of giant heavenly demons and 5 peerless heavenly demons charged at the swastika symbol at the same time. Their terrifying power was as vast as the ocean, unstoppable. However, at this moment, boundless golden light rose from the golden symbol and began to condense, finally forming a giant golden palm that stretched for 30,000 kilometers. When the golden palm appeared, all things in the world were enveloped by a strange Buddhist principle. Countless golden lines spread between the heavens and earth, interweaving in the multidimensional space to form the supreme law of heaven and earth. The heavenly demons were horrified to find that their speed had slowed down, and some of them even seemed to have touched some kind of restriction. Their bodies naturally turned into a pool of liquid, and they didn't even have time to scream before they had already died. "Lay down the butcher's knife," the Buddhist voice appeared again, still unhurried and permeating all things. Bang, 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 apart from the peerless heavenly demons, all the weapons, claws, and fangs in the hands of the heavenly demons were broken by an unknown power. "Return to the heavenly Tao," the Buddhist voice sounded again. Following this, the 30,000-li giant golden palm slapped toward the sky. After it moved, before its palm even arrived, the terrifying power had already distorted the space. One after another, the heavenly demons could not bear the pressure of the palm and exploded like fireworks. The sky fiends did not feel any killing intent from this palm. It contained the boundless power of light and infinite compassion. It merely wanted to tell the heavenly demons that they should return to where they came from. This was not a place for them to stay. In fact, it could also be summed up in one word: get lost. This was the boundless golden merciful palm. One by one, the heavenly demons exploded. The powerful giant heavenly demons wanted to tear this palm apart and released powerful attacks. However, before those attacks could even touch the palm, they were disintegrated into light by the strange Buddhist light and disappeared. Following that, the gigantic heavenly demon was also pierced by the Buddhist light and died on the spot. "Kill. Let's join forces and break it." The expressions of the 5 peerless heavenly demons in the black hole changed drastically, and they joined forces to unleash their world-destroying purple flames. The world-destroying purple flames gathered into a gigantic purple flaming demon that could flatten the Buddhist kingdom's super city with a single stomp. It ruthlessly smashed toward the palm. The size of the purple flaming demon had already exceeded the monk's imagination. However, the boundless great merciful palm was even larger, reaching a length of 30,000 li. Facing the purple flaming demon's fist, the golden palm did not react at all. It continued to slap toward the sky. Then, the fist and palm collided, and the golden light and purple flames crazily clashed. In just a second, the purple flames were pierced through by the golden light, and the 10,000 li purple flaming demon was reduced to ashes amidst its tragic cries. There was no chance of a comeback. Our joint attack was broken? How is this possible? The peerless heavenly demons were shocked. How can there be an existence of this level in the Western Buddhist kingdom? No one could answer them. The only thing that could answer them was the boundless great merciful palm. The peerless heavenly demons were torn apart by the palm energy and turned into ink. They had no time to resist, and were slapped back into their mother's womb. Even the 3 peerless heavenly demons that had once caused the Maitreya Buddha to perish were squashed alive by the boundless great merciful palm's thumb. After the giant golden palm crushed all the heavenly demons, it did not disappear. It swept through everything in its path and continued smashing toward the black hole in the heavenly demon's nest. Boom! With an indescribable explosion, the palm smashed down, causing the sky to tremble. A golden shockwave spread out for 100,000 li. Under the boundless great merciful palm, the black hole rapidly shrunk and cracked. Finally, it turned into nothingness and returned to the heavenly Tao. This palm could destroy billions of demons and purify the heavens. All the monks and Buddhas in the Western Buddhist kingdom could see the golden light that filled the sky. It was a light that was filled with hope and compassion. The terrifying heavenly demons were all reduced to ashes under the golden light. Just as all the heavenly demons were purified, the swastika symbol on the ground seemed to have run out of energy. Along with the giant palm in the sky, it disappeared. Everything between heaven and earth fell silent. There were no more roars of the heavenly demons, no more sorrowful cries of the monks and Buddhas. There was only a city with billowing smoke and a clear night sky. The heavenly demons beside the monks and Buddhas, who were fighting with the heavenly demons, had already been reduced to ashes. They looked at the clean night sky and the heavenly demons that had been completely wiped out. Tears welled up in their eyes. Even though they had diluted their 7 emotions and 6 desires, they still could not stop their tears. It's over, it's finally over. I thought our Western paradise was going to turn into dust. I didn't expect that we would still be alive. He killed all the enemies with a single palm? Which Buddha is this? How could he have such a powerful Buddhist aura? Namo Amitabha. From hell to Western paradise, it only took an instant. 1 word to purify all living beings, 1 palm to turn the world around. Only he can do that. Most of the monks and Buddhas were just in a trance and shocked. But some of the Buddhas had already turned their attention to the core of the Western Buddhist kingdom. They respectfully and devoutly bowed in that direction. Buddhist chants began to reverberate between heaven and earth. All the deities and Buddhas began to chant at the same time. Countless golden Sanskrit characters were embedded in the sky, illuminating the entire land in the dark night. It was sacred and peaceful. The calamity that had spread throughout the Western paradise began to dissipate amidst the Buddhist chant. It seemed to be purging the dead monks from purgatory. Wisps of golden light rose from the ground and circled in the sky. Unknowingly, the billions of living beings in the Western paradise seemed to have seen the shadow of an endless and majestic Buddha when they looked up into the sky. It sat cross-legged in the sky. Its height was boundless, and the golden light it emitted was boundless. Namo Amitabha, he's our Buddha, Gautama Buddha. Chapter 23:39. The heaven-splitting array spread across the heavens and earth. The heavenly Tao collapsed and the world sank. Golden light erupted from the Western paradise, lighting up the night sky of the Tai Chu continent. Countless experts cast their gazes towards the Western pure land of ultimate bliss, their faces filled with astonishment. They didn't expect that at this time, there would actually be an existence with supreme Taoist techniques appearing in the world. The ones who were most shocked were the world comprehenders. It had been paying close attention to the disaster of the Western Buddhist kingdom, and it had also predicted that the Western Buddhist kingdom would be destroyed in a quarter of an hour. However, to his surprise, a single palm was enough to eliminate the calamity of the heavenly demon and restore peace to the world. This is Sakyamuni Buddha? The world-enlightened cultivator looked at the huge Buddha image in the sky and then at the golden lotus that seemed to have come to life. He had an epiphany. So that's how it is, transforming one's body into a lotus, quietly waiting for karma. No wonder it had disappeared all this time. It turns out that it had long anticipated that this day would come. Did it make such a huge sacrifice for the sake of today's results? The world comprehender sighed with emotion. At the same time, he was filled with admiration. It didn't really understand the emotion of sacrificing oneself to save others. It was good enough to have philosophical thoughts every day. It couldn't understand why people would sacrifice their precious thinking time to do this kind of thing. However, this did not prevent it from admiring Shakyamuni Buddha, because an existence that could do such a thing must be an existence with great wisdom. Shakyamuni Buddha did it, almost at the same time. The wriggling black ink in the sky above the kingdom of the 9 states and the purple star ruins suddenly shuddered violently and stopped wriggling. Instead, it was slowly absorbed into the heavenly Tao. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu were both completely dumbstruck by the sight of the 2 heavenly demons becoming weaker and weaker. Then, they looked at the endless golden light that was faintly coming from the west. Only then did they understand. Before the 2 disciples could make a move, the peerless sky demon howled miserably and was directly sucked into the sky, disappearing into the black cracks. Situations similar to Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu's were still playing out in every corner of the kingdom of the 9 states and the purple star ruins. In less than a quarter of an hour, all the heavenly demons had disappeared. Peace returned to the kingdom of the 9 states after the calamity. The cultivators raised their heads to look at the sky. For the first time, they felt that a sky without a heavenly demon falling from the sky was so beautiful and worth cherishing. Within the 4-9 immortal sect. On the spell altar at the center of the Purple Star Pavilion Tao Plaza. Bai Ling exhaled lightly, and her tense nerves finally relaxed a little as a faint smile appeared on her face. It looks like those gods of creation haven't abandoned their homes. The Buddhist kingdom of the West has won this time. In the center of the Purple Star ruins, the black ink that filled the eyes retracted back into the heavenly axiom, leaving behind a devastated land. A hint of elation appeared on Cyril's face. "We did it." Chen Chen nodded. The Buddha of the Buddhist kingdom of the West, Gautama Buddha, appeared and turned the tide, breaking the heavenly demon tribulation. Cyril sighed with emotion. What a formidable character! Even the heavens have been plotted against. The most powerful spear often had the most fatal flaw. The heavenly axiom originally thought that the Buddhist kingdom in the West would be a very good entry point, but I didn't expect that fellow to have already buried everything and was just waiting for the heavens to set that place as the entry point. It's all thanks to the Gautama Buddha. He's been a great help. The number 1 heavenly disciple, Cyril, was in a very good mood, and his face was filled with joy and appreciation. A powerful teammate had suddenly appeared to vanquish a tribulation that had been giving him a massive headache. Anyone would be happy for a long time. Chen Chen was also quite elated. Even though the heaven-crushing sect is responsible for crushing the heavens, we've never been the only ones protecting the heavens. The 7th heavenly tribulation, the heavenly demon tribulation, had been completely vanquished. Cyril's heaven-crushing black and white spear continued to pierce deeper into the heavenly Tao, and the heavenly Tao had already reached its final stage of collapse. The black-veined patterns on the heaven-crushing formation became darker and darker. Not only did they extend from the ground to the sky, but they were also growing larger and branching out more and more, making it difficult to tell whether they were the cracks in the sky or the heaven-crushing formation. The 2 were different, but they seemed to be slowly fusing together. A black dot began to appear in Chen Chen's hand. This was pure darkness, the ultimate darkness. It was like the only thing that remained after all things had died. It could be infinitely small, but it could also be infinitely large. In any case, all tangible and intangible existences were nothingness to it. 8th heaven-crushing technique, Tao Child of Darkness. Chen Chen tossed the black dot into the sky. The Tao Child of Darkness quickly flew into the sky before suddenly disappearing at the pinnacle of the heavens. The heaven-crushing sect members faltered upon seeing this. Just as they were wondering why Chen Chen's spell technique wasn't reacting, darkness suddenly obscured the entire sky. Boom! The Tao Child of Darkness exploded. This darkness was capable of engulfing even light, and it completely engulfed the surrounding space, energy, laws, and even time. Normal return to void and Tao integration stage mighty figures were struck by a rush of dizziness just by looking at this darkness, as if their very existence was about to be engulfed into nothingness in that instant. The great Tao of heaven and earth wailed with grief again. A crisp, shattering sound reverberated in the ears of all living beings on the Tai Chu continent and the infinite realm of stars. It was as if something around them had disappeared. How many living beings were there in the Tai Chu continent and the infinite realm of stars? There wasn't a single god of creation who could calculate this number. However, what was certain was that this number was absolutely astonishing. Now, Chen Chen's actions had affected all of the living beings in this universe. So what would the living beings in this universe react to this? Most of them wouldn't react in any way. At most, they would just be a little confused. Only some of the more powerful experts would feel uneasy. They could sense that the heavenly Tao was heading toward destruction, and they were about to lose the heavenly Tao that they had grown accustomed to. The dissatisfaction of one living being might not amount to much. But what if 10,000 living beings were dissatisfied? What if 100 million living beings were dissatisfied? What about 1 trillion living beings? Any number, when multiplied by 1 trillion, would become extremely massive. All of the living beings in this universe would develop negative emotions due to the destruction of the heavenly Tao. When these negative emotions gathered together, they would form a very special and terrifying power. Where would this special power go? There was a cause and effect. This power would go to whoever destroyed the heavenly Tao. The two heavenly disciples, Cyril and Chen Chen, bore the brunt of this power. A massive red fruit began to emerge from the crack in the heavenly Tao. It had a diameter of over 1,000 feet, and it was glossy, exuding an extremely alluring scent. At first glance, it looked like a red apple. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that it was even redder and rounder than a red apple. In fact, it was flawlessly perfect. All of the heaven-crushing sect members instinctively swallowed upon seeing this apple, even though they were on guard. Only Chen Chen and Cyril drew a sharp intake of breath. The eighth tribulation of the heavenly Tao was here. Chapter 2340. No matter what you do, you need to be responsible. The heavenly Tao was very fair. If Chen Chen and Cyril had decided to destroy it, then it would make these two culprits bear the negative emotions of all living beings. This was responsibility. That red fruit contained the negative emotions of billions of living beings. All the evil consequences of the destruction of the heavenly Tao were gathered on this fruit. Hua! Suddenly, a shocking sword light tore through the air and landed on the fruit. The extremely powerful sword chi even split the sky in half. But the fruit didn't change at all. It wasn't even affected by the sword chi attack. It didn't even shake. Cyril slowly sheathed his sword with a disappointed expression. I can't. Of course it's impossible to cut it. This is the collective of the negative emotions of billions of living beings. Holding a sword to their necks like this will only make their negative emotions worse, and the red fruit will be even more terrifying. Chen Chen shook his head. Cyril's lips twitched slightly. He knew that Chen Chen's words made sense. The red fruit hung quietly in the sky like a beautiful object waiting to be plucked. The fragrance it emitted was extremely tempting. Everyone else in the heaven-crushing sect felt that the red fruit was extremely alluring and wanted to taste it. However, to Cyril and Chen Chen, it was extremely poisonous, and they didn't even want to touch it. However, the two heavenly sons also knew that this was a hurdle that could not be crossed. This was not just a hurdle set up by the heavenly Tao, but also a hurdle set up by the billions of lives in the universe. If they could not overcome this hurdle, even if they could forcefully break through the heavens, they would not be able to become the heavens. The wishes of all living beings, the fruit of all living beings. Although it's a bad result, it's still a great thing. Chen Chen sighed as he looked at the red fruit. The red fruit seemed to have heard Chen Chen's praise, and it was a little happy. It actually shrank its body, going from a 30-meter-tall fruit to a red fruit the size of an apple. It was as if it wanted to make it easier for Chen Chen to eat. When Chen Chen saw this, not only did he not feel happy, but he felt a chill run down his spine. This thing was absolutely deadly. Chen Chen, how about we split the loot? Cyril gripped the heaven-crushing spear tightly with one hand and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead with the other. The heavenly Tao tribulation this time did not seem to have any aura or might. It was just a red fruit, quietly hanging high in the sky. However, Cyril was well aware that the two of them could very well die on the spot. This was the consequence of gathering the power of all living beings. The living beings' tribulation was no joke. Half each. Chen Chen raised his pretty brows and said, "Aren't you afraid that the calamity of all beings will give us a buy one get one free one?" Hearing this, Cyril felt awkward. He naturally knew what Chen Chen meant. If the power of this fruit was so terrifying that both of them died after eating it, then no one would be able to shoulder the heavy responsibility of breaking the heavens. This meant that it was better to have one dead than two dead. However, could the sacrifice of one really offset the resentment of all living beings? Cyril hesitated momentarily before finally shaking his head in a firm manner. "No, we'll split it equally. If one of us dies, then the success rate of the heaven-crushing plan will greatly decrease. Why don't we take a gamble?" Seeing Cyril's insistence, Chen Chen naturally didn't insist. "All right, I'll go first," Chen Chen said. As he spoke, he walked towards the red fruit and held it in his hand. The fruit was very smooth and cold to the touch, and it was even a little heavy. When Chen Chen tried to sense just how heavy it was, his senses became blurry and hazy, and he was unable to ascertain its exact weight. He unleashed his power to inspect the interior of the fruit, only to discover that it was filled with boundless negative energy essence. As for how much negative energy essence there was, Chen Chen was unable to ascertain it, but if he had to describe it with one word, it would be boundless. Boundless. In all honesty, Chen Chen wasn't even sure if he would be able to withstand the living being's tribulation. However, he had already resolved himself, and no matter how fearsome the difficulties before him were, even if he had to pay with his life, he would continue onward with an indomitable will. Chen Chen held the living being's tribulation fruit tightly in his hand, and was just about to swallow it. "Wait!" Cyril suddenly spoke. Chen Chen faltered slightly before turning to look at Cyril. Cyril said in a deep voice, "If this red fruit isn't an actual fruit, then it'll assume that you're the one who took the first bite, so you'll be the one to bear all the tribulations. Then, it'll throw all the tribulations onto you. In that case, there'll be no point in splitting the fruits." Chen Chen furrowed his brows as he understood what Cyril was implying. "One bite is equivalent to eating everything? Then what do you plan to do?" the youth asked. "We'll establish a spiritual connection. Regardless of whether it's on a physical or spiritual level, we'll simultaneously chew on the apple," Cyril replied with a serious expression. Chen Chen, as a god of creation, this was indeed something he could do. However, he felt like something was off. Chen Chen didn't hesitate for long before adopting Cyril's suggestion. At this moment, within the heaven-crushing glazed palace, all of the heaven-crushing sect members were injecting energy into the heaven-crushing formation as they watched. They all knew that the red fruit was no ordinary fruit, so they were all very nervous when Chen Chen received it. In particular, Shui Yen was clenching her petite hands tightly. She hadn't released them in a long time. She was constantly worried about Chen Chen. "Look, Chen Chen is placing the red fruit in front of Cyril. Is he planning to let Master Cyril eat it first?" The heaven-crushing sect members didn't hear the conversation between the two heavenly disciples, so they were all extremely curious about this. Why do I feel like the two heavenly disciples are acting a little strange? A heaven-crushing sect member muttered with a strange expression. The others didn't retort. At this moment, Chen and Cyril were slowly approaching each other. They were getting closer and closer. Finally, they were only a distance away from the red fruit. The red fruit was right in the middle of their mouth. Chen's clear black eyes were locked with Cyril's warm, crimson eyes. Both of them stared intently at each other. It was as if everything in this world had disappeared, and the only thing left in their eyes was each other. What are they trying to do? Could it be that they feel like eating the fruit is extremely risky, so they're trying to do something before they die? A return to void stage female celestial immortal blushed, as if she had thought of something. Even her breathing quickened as she stared intently at the two people in the sky. She was afraid that she would miss out on any shocking moment. Shui Yan's eyelids twitched upon hearing this, and she looked into the distance even more nervously. Her expression was clearly very cold, but her heart was already burning with raging flames. Could it be? Could it be? Right at this moment, Chen and Cyril simultaneously opened their mouth. Chapter 23:41. Just as Chen and Cyril opened their mouths slightly, the heaven-crushing sect members couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. If it weren't for the fact that the celestial maidens were still somewhat reserved, they would probably be screaming right now. Shui Yan's beautiful eyes widened. It was unknown what kind of complex emotions she was feeling right now. Chen gazed at Cyril, and Cyril's eyes also reflected Chen's figure. Their minds and Tao realms became extremely compatible at a certain moment, as if they had established some kind of mysterious connection. Chen knew what Cyril was thinking, and Cyril also knew what Chen was thinking. Then, Chen and Cyril didn't continue to approach each other. They simultaneously opened their mouths toward the red fruit and bit down at the same time. Crunch! The crisp sound of the fruit being bitten rang out. In a situation where their physical movements, mental inclination, and Tao realm desires were exactly the same, they ate half of the apple each. It was a perfect cut and a perfect distribution. This was an action that no one in this world could pull off. It was too exaggerated. Putting aside the likes of spiritual Tao realms, very few people could bite an apple in half at the same time. However, Chen and Cyril had created a miracle, and their coordination was perfect. The red fruit was swallowed by the two of them. Both of them opened their mouths and continuously chewed with their teeth. A rich juice flowed out of their mouth. It was sweet and sour, and it was quite delicious. However, the two of them didn't dare to be careless. After biting to a certain extent, they swallowed it into their stomach. A warm feeling started to flow through their bodies. It was as if they had eaten a divine fruit. The heaven-crushing sect members were all stunned. In fact, some female cultivators even sighed lightly, as if they were slightly disappointed. After all this time, the two of them were actually eating the apple in such a strange position? Shui Yan breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she became alert again. This was a heavenly Tao tribulation. How could it be passed so easily? In the next instant, Chen and Cyril's expressions instantly became extremely grim. Woo! Ah! The two of them clutched their stomachs at the same time. Their brows were tightly furrowed, and even their bodies started to tremble uncontrollably. What's wrong with the heavenly disciples? Heavens, why do they look like they're in so much pain? Could it be that they ate something bad? Isn't that obvious? It was obvious that there was something wrong with that red fruit. That thing is poisonous. It's not as simple as poison. There's no poison in the world that can affect heaven and earth. This is an evil consequence of a higher level, or rather, it's a combination of the negative emotions of all living beings in the universe due to the heavenly Tao being broken. The ancient dragon empress provided an explanation to everyone within the heaven-crushing glazed palace. Only then did everyone realize why the two heavenly sons were so serious. Were they fighting against the negative influences of the entire universe? Anything, once it involved the universe level, was an unimaginably terrifying thing. It could easily destroy any life form. Boundless emotional energy exploded within the bodies of the two heavenly sons. Their bodies were on the verge of exploding. If they were weaker gods of creation, they would have definitely been driven insane by this, but Chun and Cyril were able to hold on through sheer determination. Cyril even began to chortle with glee. Ha ha ha, Chun, we've succeeded. We can perfectly share the burden of this terrifying power. Pfft! Cyril laughed heartily before suddenly throwing up a mouthful of blood. Chun shot a cold glance at the man who was laughing heartily. Cut the crap and focus. Pfft! He couldn't help but throw up a mouthful of blood as well. Cyril, Chun, all of the heaven-crushing sect members let loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. This was the first time they had seen the two heavenly sons wounded at this point in the heaven-crushing plan. These were two beings who were virtually invincible. At this moment, the emotional energy of the entire universe exploded within their bodies. This energy was more terrifying than any god of creation's attack, and it was countless times more terrifying than the explosion of a large world within their bodies. Boundless tribulations and boundless negative energy. Cyril and Chun's eyes were already completely bloodshot, and violent thoughts of slaughter and annihilation reverberated relentlessly in their minds. If they were super mighty figures or even gods of creation, they would have most likely lost themselves a long time ago. Chun and Cyril were also in an extremely difficult situation. Both of them unleashed their respective divine techniques to repress the violent tribulation of life power within their bodies. Chun had been forced to unleash his most powerful trump card, which was the power of his inner universe, to open up a spotless realm to contain the violent power. However, there was still a vast amount of negative emotions and resentment that penetrated through the spotless realm to directly affect Chun's body. Cyril unleashed a mystic technique to unleash his true demon origin energy to its maximal extent, but he was still throwing up blood at a rate that was almost 3 times that of Chun. However, Chun wasn't worried about him, as Cyril had a lot of blood. Chun was different. His blood was extremely precious, and every single drop of it was a crystallization of energy and power. After refining it, it could be sold as a top-grade divine rank material. Ancient Dragon Empress, are those two heavenly sons really going to be alright? Some of the heaven-crushing sect members were panicking. The ancient Dragon Empress lips twitched. How was she supposed to respond? This didn't look like it was going to be alright. They were about to throw up all their blood. However, she couldn't just tell them that the two heavenly sons were in danger. Thus, the ancient Dragon Empress chose to remain silent. In reality, no one could tell what was going on from the outside. This tribulation was even more minor than all of the previous tribulations. However, it was actually more dangerous than all of the previous tribulations. This was because the power that was attacking the two heavenly sons was a universe-rank power. Chun and Cyril were currently experiencing the most difficult moment. Both of their faces had become extremely pale, and the negative emotions within their bodies were becoming more and more exaggerated and powerful. Not only were their bodies about to explode, but it was as if the universe itself was about to explode as well. In the next instant, Chun and Cyril's stomachs began to bulge strangely. First it was 1 month, then it was 3 months. In the end, it became 8 months. Not only that, but both of their stomachs also began to bulge like 2 round balls. Ah! Cyril couldn't take it anymore, and he howled in pain. Chun's face was deathly pale, and he gritted his teeth as he tried his best not to howl. To be honest, it was too embarrassing to howl out loud. Especially when a man was howling like this when his stomach was bloated. Those who didn't know better would think that he had some sort of relationship with Cyril. They ate a forbidden fruit, yet their stomachs were suddenly impregnated. If word of this got out, it wouldn't be good. Chun endured and endured. Cyril endured and endured. All of the heaven-crushing glazed palace members widened their eyes as they watched nervously. In the end, it was as if the thing in their stomachs had broken through a certain limit. Bam! Bam! Two massive explosions erupted into the heavens. Chun and Cyril's stomachs exploded at the same time. They transformed into two clouds of crimson mist in the sky. Chapter 23:42. Two clouds of crimson mist exploded in the air. It was so sudden and terrifying. Chun and Cyril's stomachs exploded, shocking all of the heaven-crushing sect members. Some of the female cultivators even screamed in horror. My God! The heavenly disciples have exploded! Our heavenly disciples have exploded! Quick! Who's skilled in medicine? Hurry and save them! All of the heaven-crushing sect members were in a state of complete panic. They felt as if their two pillars had collapsed, and the world had lost all its luster. Shui Yen immediately rose into the air and tried to rush to Chun Chen's side. However, she suddenly faltered in mid-air. The crimson mist dissipated, and Chun and Cyril were still there. Chun clutched his stomach, and his clothes were stained red with blood. The white light that was imbued with the power of the universe and shimmering with billions of stars formed a ball of light to suppress the power within his stomach. Cyril appeared to be in an even more wretched state. There was already a massive hole in his stomach, from which a crimson consciousness entity was exploding incessantly, trying to destroy his existence. However, the vast true demon origin energy around his stomach was able to withstand the explosions within his stomach. Thankfully, the two heavenly disciples had many tricks up their sleeves, so they weren't killed on the spot. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Chun and Cyril looked at each other, and both of them could see a hint of lingering fear in each other's eyes. Only Chun and Cyril were aware of just how perilous their experience had been. Just a moment ago, the power of negative emotions in the universe had reached its peak. They had almost been completely obliterated by the power of the tribulation of all beings. Not only that, but the heaven-crushing glazed palace and the heaven-crushing formation were also about to be pulverized by that devastating power. Thankfully, they had managed to hold on and suppress it. What followed next was a slow process of wearing down and enduring. This process required time. The heaven-crushing process was already nearing its end. At this moment, the battle over the White Nectar Sea was also nearing its end. Due to the activation of the Heavenly Life God's Tao manifestation, the three-phase true heavenly reincarnation formation's power had been activated to its maximum, causing the power of the 10 primordial beings to increase explosively. The gate of hell was still wide open, and torrential blood water kept gushing out from it. The power of the blood sea was getting more and more turbulent, and the demons and ghosts were getting more and more violent. The three creatures couldn't hold on any longer, and they were forced to dispel the extreme psionic state. Countless ferocious ghosts and powerful demons pounced on the three living beings. The power of the blood sea crazily suppressed the three living beings. The bodies of the three living beings were torn apart several times, and their source power grew weaker and weaker. I can't believe that I, the highest god of the spirit clan, was not defeated by the flower goddess, but will be swallowed by this broken door. The three creatures struggled to think of a way out of this situation. They felt an indescribable sense of humiliation. Perhaps the pinnacle of its life was about to fall here? The three creatures were very unwilling, but faced with the hopeless situation before them, there was nothing they could do. At the next moment, a strange bell suddenly rang. Ding-ling-ling, ding-ling-ling. The crisp sound of the bell reverberated in every corner of the blood sea. The three creatures shivered. They heard a different rhythm from the bell sound. Every sound reverberated in the depths of one's soul. It could awaken one's sleeping conscience and calm one's violent soul. Even the extremely savage, evil spirits and demons in the blood sea showed obvious changes in their emotions. They were no longer savage. This is the soul-calming sound? The three creatures knew that the rhythm of the sound contained an extremely profound Taoist spell, and it wasn't something an ordinary cultivator could do. The three heads of the three creatures turned toward a certain direction at the same time, and their bright pupils contracted. They clearly saw an elegant man in a black robe step into the blood sea. With steady steps, he walked toward the gate of hell. At this moment, billions of demons and ghosts roared and released violent presences as they pounced toward the black-robed man. When enemies appeared, even the best soul-calming sound couldn't stop them. Mere demons and ghosts dare to act so arrogantly in front of me? The man let loose a clear roar, and a reddish-golden shockwave instantly expanded for thousands of kilometers. Regardless of whether it was the sinister demons or the sinister ghosts, all of them seemed to have been immobilized, as if they had been immobilized. What was most astonishing to the three creatures was that for the first time, all of the demons and ghosts were looking at the man with fear and submission in their eyes. One had to realize that these monsters from the infernal sea were attacking him in a suicidal manner, even when he had unleashed his full power. In other words, no matter how powerful the enemy was, they shouldn't be displaying such an expression. Why were they so fearful of this man? Fellow cultivator, I am the god of creation of the spirit tribe of the divine mirror world. May I know your name? The three creatures asked in a loud voice after ascertaining that this stranger was an ally. The man's clear roar intimidated billions of demons and ghosts, but he nodded with a friendly smile upon seeing the three creatures. Nice to meet you. I am the paramount god of the Tai Chu continent's ghost tribe, Patriarch Zhu. The paramount god of the Tai Chu continent's ghost tribe. The three creatures suddenly understood why those evil ghosts and fiends were so afraid of the man in front of them. He was the paramount god of the ghost tribe of the Tai Chu continent, which was located at the center of the universe. What did this mean? This meant that no one in the entire universe could match up to him in terms of the ghost Tao. This was how powerful a paramount god was. Just like that, the billions of evil spirits and demons were rooted to the spot. They clearly wanted to move, they clearly wanted to attack, but they were completely frozen in place by the strange aura, unable to move at all. Patriarch Zhu was like their king, and they could only look on as the black-robed man made his way toward the gates of hell. However, right at this moment, the infernal sea seemed to have sensed something, and it began to churn violently. As the infernal sea surged, two crimson hands over 100,000 feet in length suddenly materialized, obscuring heaven and earth before crashing down toward the man with boundless power of death. The demons and ghosts were afraid of Patriarch Zhu, but it wasn't. This was because the infernal sea released by the gates of hell was the true form of the 10 primordial creatures. As for the demons and ghosts, they were merely derivatives of the infernal sea. Patriarch Zhu expression remained unchanged as he extended a palm toward the crimson hands, upon which a crimson-golden essential power erupted from his palm. Boom! The reddish-golden palm energy distorted space and the laws of nature, instantly crushing the two majestic pairs of bloody hands into steam. Even the hundreds of thousands of evil spirits and demons in the surroundings were smashed into ashes. One palm, and all life was destroyed. Patriarch Zhu looked at the infernal sea with a calm expression. What other techniques do you have? Use them now. If you don't, I'm going to break down the gate. Chapter 23:43. The three living beings were in awe of Patriarch Zhu peerlessly domineering aura. As expected, a god of creation native to the Tai Chu continent was no ordinary being. Even though he wasn't as powerful as Goddess Tina, he was still quite impressive. Hey Xiaoru, can you stop flexing and get down to business? A crisp, pleasant female voice sounded from the floral bracelet around Patriarch Zhu wrist. Boom! The infernal sea was enraged by Patriarch Zhu words. The blood sea surged violently, sweeping up earth-shattering tsunamis. A demonic head blood lion over 300,000 feet tall suddenly leaped out of the blood sea, and just one roar was enough to sweep up a massive wave of blood tens of thousands of feet tall. Extremely terrifying and hellish aura proliferated forth in a frenzy. Any return to void stage mighty figure that was struck by this aura would be reduced to a puddle of blood. The three living beings were astonished. The infernal sea still has this kind of power? They knew that this was the final trump card that the infernal sea had unleashed after giving up on the evil spirits and demons. However, they didn't think that the infernal sea would be so powerful. Is this your trump card? Patriarch Zhu Yin smiled. It is indeed very powerful. Looks like I have to get serious. As he spoke, his skin began to turn crimson, and crystal-red dragon horns began to protrude from his head. Azure dragon scales began to appear on his skin, and an extremely powerful divine aura began to spread in the form of a substantial ripple. Roar! At this moment, the demonic head blood lion had already extended its sharp claws, which were powerful enough to tear apart the heavens, toward Patriarch Zhu Yin. Before its crimson claws had even landed, a few abysses had already been torn open in the infernal sea. Ha ha! Very good, very good! Patriarch Zhu Yin chortled with glee as he faced the terrifying demonic head blood lion and stretched lazily. All of a sudden, Patriarch Zhu Yin's body began to expand drastically. Not only was his body expanding, but his head was also expanding. 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet, 100,000 feet to the ghost head blood lion. It was originally smaller than a grain, but it suddenly expanded to several times its size. Furthermore, it knocked away the ghost head blood lion's sharp claws with its head. Before the ghost head blood lion could react, it saw the human-headed dragon god's godly spirit whip its tail. Like a bolt of azure light, it sent the continent-sized ghost head blood lion flying thousands of kilometers away. The tragic cries of the lion and the roar of the dragon echoed throughout the world. The three living beings' eyes widened as they stared at Patriarch Zhu Yin. Patriarch Zhu Yin's body was over 1,000,000 feet long. It had a gigantic human head with dragon horns, and its eyes were like two blazing suns. Its body was in the shape of a dragon, and its green scales glowed with a cold green divine light. With a gentle flick of its tail, it could set off a tsunami that reached the sky. This was Patriarch Zhu Yin's true form, the supreme god of the ghost tribe with a human head and a dragon body. Phew! It gently blew a breath of air at the surging sea of blood. The reddish-gold origin energy carried a strange cold aura as it spread out in all directions like a ring-shaped shockwave. It actually froze the violent and crazy sea of blood. Crack, 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 the paramount ghost's frosty power quickly spread, and in the blink of an eye, the entire sea of blood within a radius of over 5,000 kilometers was frozen into a sea of blood. Roar! How dare you freeze my infernal sea? You're dead! The ghost head blood lion roared as it charged toward Patriarch Zhu Yin from afar. Soul roar! Roar! The ghost head blood lion suddenly opened its mouth and let loose a roar. Dark red sound waves drew upon the power of the great Tao of heaven and earth to form countless crimson sound waves that swept toward Patriarch Zhu Yin's dragon body. That extreme soul power caused a soul shock. Even the three creatures in the distance could feel a force tearing their souls apart. Patriarch Zhu Yin also opened his mouth, and crimson golden essential power quickly converged within it. Death, reincarnation, dragon might, and ghostly Tao. The four elements were perfectly fused together, and the power of the ultimate essence erupted forth at this moment. 900 million Luo heavenly ghost cannon. Boom! The crimson golden dragon's roar erupted in a fan-shaped manner. In the next instant, the two roars clashed, and it was as if two stars had exploded. Terrifying power instantly tore through the frozen sea and evaporated the sea of blood within a radius of over 5,000 kilometers. The crimson golden dragon's roar then became even more powerful, and it engulfed the power of the ghost head blood lion's roar before devouring its body right before the ghost head blood lion's horrified eyes. Roar, roar, roar! The blood lion howled with anguish as its gargantuan body of hundreds of thousands of feet continued to thrash about in a frenzy. Dragon might was responsible for suppression, death was responsible for destruction, and reincarnation was responsible for severing life force. Soon, the blood lion was reduced to a puddle of blood again before merging into the sea of blood. It was also at this moment that the sea of blood seemed to have suffered some kind of lethal blow, and it completely wilted. Even the roaring sea in the distance had become a lot quieter, as if it were a child that had been beaten into submission, so powerful. The three living beings murmured to themselves as they looked at Patriarch Zhu-Yin. The power that Patriarch Zhu-Yin was displaying at this moment had already exceeded his maximum capacity. Patriarch Zhu-Yin's body quickly shrank back into the elegant middle-aged man in a black robe. A faint smile appeared on his face as he looked around at the sea of blood, as if he were asking, "Do you have any more techniques? Come at me." Billions of evil ghosts and demons were immobilized on the spot. The once turbulent and evil infernal sea had also become a little more tranquil. The sea of blood remained silent. Patriarch Zhu-Yin strode forward and stood in front of the gate of hell. The infernal sea and the gate of hell were like going home to the paramount gods of the ghost tribe, and there was nothing to be afraid of. This gate of hell is unimaginably tough, and it seems to have taken root in the Tao of heaven and earth. It's very difficult to break or close it using normal methods, but I've already tried many methods. The three living beings cautioned in order to save Patriarch Zhu-Yin some time. A faint smile appeared on Patriarch Zhu-Yin's face. "I've seen everything you've done, but you know what? The gate of hell doesn't actually have to be closed from the outside." The three living beings faltered upon hearing this before a very absurd thought occurred to them. "What did you say? Could it be that you want to?" Patriarch Zhu-Yin looked up at the infernal gates, which were still gushing with blood, and he strode toward the two massive gates again. His body gradually disappeared, and only his voice could be heard. "That's right. Closing the gates from the inside is the correct way to do things." Patriarch Zhu-Yin disappeared into the gate of hell. The three living beings were dumbstruck. He had never even thought about entering the gate. This was like a gate that was constantly gushing with lava. Normal people would want to close the gate from the outside, but who would think about going into the gate and closing the gate from the inside? However, Patriarch Zhu-Yin had done just that. Chapter 2344. Patriarch Zhu-Yin's actions had given the three living beings quite a fright. Is he really going to be all right? Will he be able to come back? The three living beings knew that this was an extremely risky move. One had to know that they didn't even know what was behind the gates. How confident did he have to be able to do this? Rumble, a peculiar sound erupted. The two massive gates of hell were slowly closing in at a rate discernible to the naked eye. At the same time, a boundless sea of blood was surging into the gates at an extremely terrifying rate. He really did it. The three living beings were extremely excited. The sea of blood became smaller and smaller, and the gates of hell also became smaller and smaller. In the end, all of the sea of blood surged into the gates of hell, and the gates of hell were completely shut. Tears welled up in the eyes of the three living beings upon seeing this. It had wanted to see this even in its dreams, but its dream had been fulfilled by Patriarch Zhu-Yin. The infernal gate disaster had finally been averted. But how is Patriarch Zhu-Yin going to come out? Is he going to open the gates of hell again? The three living beings' three heads were filled with question marks as they looked at the massive gates of hell. In the next instant, a crisp sound erupted from within the gates of hell. Countless cracks began to appear on the gargantuan gates before finally shattering into countless shards that fell into the white nectar sea. As for Patriarch Zhu-Yin, he had already disappeared from this world. Where did Patriarch Zhu-Yin go? Could he have already died? From the moment he stepped into the gates of hell, he had no intention of coming back. He chose a path of no return for this world, Tui. How could he say that? He was such a confident and powerful man, how could he die so easily? The three living beings began to discuss spiritedly among themselves. At this moment, All of the heaven-crushing united army spectating from afar were extremely excited. Never would they have thought that the paramount god of the ghost tribe would participate in this battle at such a critical moment. This was undoubtedly a massive boost to their morale. Even Yuhua, who was spectating from afar, was shocked by this. Zhu Yin is also participating in this battle? Isn't he a god of creation who likes to spend time with the two of them? Even when the opposite shore realm is in turmoil, he can't be bothered to take the initiative. Why is he so interested in this battle? Yuhua was perplexed. At this moment, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue chuckled happily. He stroked his beard and said, "The time has come, the time has come." Yuhua raised her eyebrows and asked, "When did they arrive?" At this time, the old man's figure became fainter and fainter before finally disappearing. "Sky Sovereign, what are you thinking about now?" A wisp of contemplation appeared on Yuhua's extremely gentle and beautiful face. She glanced at the heaven Tao that might collapse completely at any moment, and she seemed to have understood something before she sighed. "Really, is it so easy for people to change sides?" In the western region of the White Nectar Sea, on a boundless land of fortune, close to 100 primordial beasts unleashed their divine might as they chased Enlin and Tina relentlessly. Meanwhile, Enlin and Tina were relentlessly attacking the heavenly life goddess, and they were relentlessly attacking her with no regard for the cost or energy expenditure they had to expend. What if Tina ran out of energy? All she had to do was swallow a divine pill. The foundation that the divine mirror world had built up over such a long period of time was no joke. What if Enlin ran out of energy? That was even easier to deal with, as he still had a power bank. The life goddess was very, very powerful, but in the face of the combined attacks of two beings who were both at the pinnacle of the god of creation stage, she was still unable to immediately escape from her predicament. At this moment, a true Buddha appeared in the Buddhist kingdom of the West to deliver all living beings from suffering. Zhu Yin hovered in the northern region of the White Nectar Sea, suppressing the infernal sea. One extremely powerful being after another began to display their power, placing more and more pressure on the heavenly life goddess. Just how powerful was the Tai Chu continent? Perhaps until the very last moment no one would know. Enlin was very elated. He was stunned by the power of the Buddhist Tao of the Gautama Buddha, and he was also elated that Patriarch Zhu Yin had decided to join the battle. All of this made him feel a sense of warmth. He could sense that there were many powerful beings fighting alongside him, and this was a very good feeling. His desire to hammer the heavenly life goddess became even more intense. Little Xie. Enlin had just about exhausted all of his energy, and he immediately yelled. At this moment, little Xie stabbed her evil-slaying sword into the heavenly liquid god's body and used her final Bluetooth power bank. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, final Tao. The boundless power of the heavenly liquid god began to quickly flow into Enlin's body, slowly strengthening him. At the same time, the power of the heavenly Tao within his body surged like a tidal wave, filling his body to the brim again. Enlin's face was flushed with satisfaction. The heavenly life goddess features paled with rage. She hated expressions like this on Enlin's face the most. Everyone was clearly exhausted from the battle, so why was he able to cheat and recover his energy? However, the three paramount gods were quite relieved that this dead heavenly liquid god was Enlin's final power bank. There would be no more after this. What the F***ck was this? A sense of sorrow welled up in the hearts of the three paramount heavenly gods. Aside from the three of them, all of the other heavenly human tribe heavenly gods had died. The three lonely old men could only form a group and stay together. Just the thought of it made them feel extremely miserable. In reality, the Blood Tribe, Void Spirit Tribe, and other powers were also feeling just as dejected as them, and they were secretly appraising the battle that was taking place on the other side of the White Nectar Sea. All of the heavenly human tribe united army's allies had died, but they had managed to survive. Were they rejoicing? a little. But they were also extremely dejected and remorseful. They were warriors, but they were also witnesses. The heavenly human tribe had once stood at the pinnacle of the entire Tai Chu continent, but they had witnessed the heavenly human tribe's relentless decline and defeat before finally being completely wiped out. This time, they had chosen the wrong side. They had chosen the wrong side. They had underestimated the power of the Tai Chu continent, they had underestimated the 4-9 immortal sect, and they had underestimated the man's terrifying potential and his ability to create miracles. That's right, this was the man who was hailed as the #1 war god on the Tai Chu continent by the heaven-crushing United Army, the man who was chasing after the 3 paramount heavenly gods, Enlil. All of the Blood Tribe, Void Spirit Tribe, and Creation Realm powerful beings had interacted with Enlil to a certain extent, so their hearts were filled with indescribable complex emotions. In particular, Hong Do, who had grown up with Enlil, couldn't help but fall into a daze at the sight of this man who could dictate the fate of the entire Tai Chu continent. Was this still the same young man who had battled with him so many years ago? How had Enlil grown to such an insane level in just 100 years? If he had known that Enlil was so bad *SS, he would have joined the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army as a licker. What an idiot! Chapter 23:45. On the land of creation created by the Life Goddess, Enlil's combat prowess had reached the pinnacle again, and he threw a punch toward the Life Goddess. The power of the new 5 elements surged forth and tore through everything in its path. The Life Goddess unleashed a triple-layered shield of the power of the sea, sky, and heavens, and only then was she able to withstand Enlil's punch. Enlil was even more powerful than before. Damn it, this be *starred. The Life Goddess stumbled back in retreat as the colorful jade hairpin beside her stabbed toward Enlil's heart. Enlil didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he continued to throw punches. A golden light flashed, and Tina charged toward Enlil with her world sword in hand. Her sword instantly slashed horizontally to slice through the lethal rainbow jade hairpin. Damn it! The Life Goddess was enraged by their teamwork. At this moment, Enlil's fist had already fallen. The Life Goddess had no choice but to use the power of the sea, sky, and heavens to defend herself. Another earth-shattering collision ensued, and the woman in the flowery dress was blasted flying by the power of Enlil's punch. She was just about to retaliate when one of the 6 heavenly human wings on her back suddenly burst into flames. Her body shuddered from the excruciating pain. Enlil took advantage of this opportunity, and he gripped the air with one hand. Sword, come! A black streak of light fell from the sky. It landed in Enlil's hand, and at the same time, extreme sword Dao true intent proliferated throughout heaven and earth. 6 strikes of the war god. Divine sword. The inky black blade of the evil-slaying sword suddenly turned a pure golden jade color, and the pinnacle sword intent of the monarch of the sword was unleashed without reservation. Golden essential sword intent pierced through heaven and earth. Enlil was the #1 war god on the Tai Chu continent. At this moment, he had transformed into the #1 sword immortal on the Tai Chu continent, and he slashed his peerless divine sword toward the Life Goddess without any hesitation. His peerless sword intent surged through heaven and earth. All living beings in the central region of the Tai Chu continent could see the golden sword projection piercing through the heavens. It was pure, powerful, and filled with boundless righteousness. In the next moment, the incomparably powerful sword aura had already slashed down on the Life Goddess. The Life Goddess frantically constructed her defenses, but her defenses were so pale and powerless in the face of that terrifying sword slash. They were torn apart layer by layer, and then fell on her delicate and perfect body, from her fair shoulder all the way to her slender waist, cutting her diagonally in half. When the golden light dissipated, blood splattered in the sky. The 2 halves of the heavenly Life Goddess body began to plummet toward the ground. Enlil was panting heavily as he cast a glance at Tina. Tina immediately understood her intentions, and she charged toward the life goddess with the divine mirror world sword in her hand. The sword in her hand transformed into billions of sword projections that sliced the life goddess body into billions of particles. At this moment, close to 100 giant beasts pounced toward Enlin and Tina again. Enlin turned around and unleashed a few extremely powerful sword projections toward one of the 9-headed heavenly rocks, which bore the brunt of his attack and cleanly decapitated all 9 of its heads. The 9-headed heavenly bird didn't even get a chance to let out a wail of anguish before it fell to the ground. However, its flesh and blood squirmed in midair, and 9 new heads grew out of its body. These giant beasts still possess immortal bodies. It looks like the heavenly life goddess is still alive. Enlin flicked his sword projection before flying toward another direction at an extremely fast speed. Enlin and Tina had no intention of engaging in a battle of attrition. Instead, they flew in circles around the creation realm and kited the giant beasts. Sure enough, the life goddess was resurrected after a short while. She looked no different from before, and she was completely unscathed. However, she was missing one of her wings, thereby reducing her from 6 to 5. Furthermore, her face was a little pale, as if she had overexerted herself. Enlin! The life goddess glared at Enlin with resentment in her beautiful eyes, as if Enlin had dumped her 800 times. Enlin also turned toward the life goddess, and he was given a fright by her expression. What was going on? Why was she only glaring at him and not at Tina? He carefully inspected the life goddess condition, and he knew that her resurrection required the essence of life as an ingredient. Once she died to a certain extent, she would still truly die. Of course, Enlin wasn't placing all of his hopes on this. He was actually waiting for something else. He was waiting for the life goddess to unleash her Tao true manifestation. That's right, Enlin knew that there was a time limit to the Tao true manifestation of a paramount heavenly god. From the time that the heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god had unleashed their Tao true manifestations, Enlin could deduce how long the life goddess would be able to unleash her Tao true manifestation. As long as Enlin could last through this period of time, the life goddess would be at his mercy. Of course, the best way to stall for time wasn't to just focus on defense. Instead, it was to attack. If he could kill the life goddess by attacking, he would also be able to deplete her essence of life, thereby hastening the end of her Tao true manifestation. In the distance, the life goddess in a floral dress detected Enlin's thoughts, and a hint of mockery flashed through her hateful eyes. Heh! Enlin, I know what you're thinking. Aren't you just trying to stall for time until my Tao true manifestation is complete? The life goddess revealed Enlin's thoughts. She raised her elegant and refined face, and her expression was filled with arrogance and disdain. She said in a cold tone, "But do you know how long my Tao origin image can be maintained after I've fused with the 3 trigram true heavenly reincarnation formation? How long can it last?" Enlin asked. Longer than you think. It can definitely last until you can't hold on any longer. The life goddess wasn't going to be tricked by Enlin. Instead, she replied with a confident smile. Is that so? I'm a man of endurance. You'll see soon enough. Enlin smiled. The life goddess' face convulsed imperceptibly upon hearing this. Why was Enlin talking a little strange? The primordial beasts closed in on Enlin and Tina again. Another battle was about to erupt. All of a sudden, the space beside the life goddess exploded. The life goddess was given a fright, and she hurriedly retreated. At this moment, a black-robed man suddenly leaped out of thin air in an extremely disheveled manner. Cough, cough, cough. That was close. I thought I wouldn't be able to make it back. A gentle male voice sounded from within the cloud of dust and debris. Where is this? The man looked around with confusion in his eyes. He was then greeted by the sight of a horde of primordial beasts that were so powerful that chills ran down his spine, as well as an unfathomably powerful woman who struck him with boundless danger, yet was so beautiful that it was almost like a dream. Hey! Ms. Ding Xiaoru. Anlin extended a warm greeting. This man was none other than the paramount god of the ghost tribe, Patriarch Zhu Yin. Ding Xiaoru. So, the exit that he found by following the origin turned out to be next to the life goddess? The man looked up into the sky with a dejected expression. He was feeling extremely conflicted. So, he had fallen into a wolf's den. Chapter 2346. Hey! Fellow Taoist Ding Xiaoru, where are you looking? Look over here. Anlin waved toward Patriarch Zhu Yin with all his might as he yelled. Look at your King money. Patriarch Zhu Yin's lips twitched slightly, and he really wanted to pretend that he didn't know this B***starred. Don't you know how to size up the situation? I'm the closest to the life goddess and the primordial beasts right now, and I've fallen into a wolf's den. I really want to cut ties with you. At this moment, the life goddess had already locked onto Patriarch Zhu Yin with a murderous look in her eyes, and her terrifying killing intent had congealed the entire space around her. Cold sweat poured down Patriarch Zhu Yin's face, and he turned with difficulty to look at the exquisitely beautiful woman in her flowery dress. A dazed smile appeared on his face as he said, I just accidentally trespassed on this place. I'll leave now. A hint of a smile appeared on the life goddess' face. You killed my 10 primordial beasts, and you still want to leave unscathed? Nonsense. It was a gargantuan monster with a human head and a dragon's body that destroyed the infernal sect. What does that have to do with me, Ding Xiaoru? Patriarch Zhu Yin retorted with all his might. The life goddess chuckled coldly as she flashed toward Patriarch Zhu Yin. Extremely red power of death suddenly erupted from her slender hands, and her fingers transformed into sharp red claws. Patriarch Zhu Yin's expression shifted drastically, and he hurriedly retreated in retreat. Azure dragon scales instantly appeared on his right arm, transforming it into a dragon arm that had reached the pinnacle in both strength and defense. Deathly silence. Torch dragon god splitting fist. The fist and the claw clashed at this moment, and azure light and crimson light exploded at the same time. Not only was Patriarch Zhu Yin's fist imbued with the paramount power of dragons, it was also imbued with the power of the Ghost Tao, which could kill an enemy at the level of reincarnation. However, to his surprise, the woman's crimson claws and the extreme power of death were able to quickly erase the power of dragons and the power of the Ghost Tao. The powerful azure light only lasted for a few seconds before it was engulfed by the crimson light. The sharp red claws broke through the extremely tough azure dragon scales before stabbing into Patriarch Zhu Yin's fist like sharp swords. Arg! Patriarch Zhu Yin didn't expect his opponent's claws to be so sharp, and he immediately hurtled back in retreat, only to discover that the power of death was rapidly spreading through his wound, causing his arm to quickly age and decay. Without hesitation, he severed his own arm. Then, he watched as his arm turned into dried bones, and the dried bones turned into chin-chin. The sight made his scalp go numb. If he had been any slower, the power would have spread to his entire body, and he would have been destroyed by the power of death. Was there a danger of being killed in a second just because he was injured once? What kind of freak was Anlin fighting with? Patriarch Zhu Yin was astonished to discover that the life goddess was flying toward him on a jade hairpin with an indifferent expression. There was a rainbow light trailing behind the hairpin, and it was traveling at an unbelievably fast speed. Even Patriarch Zhu Yin was struggling to keep up with its speed, and the extreme power of death emanating from it struck him with an indescribable sense of peril. Only by experiencing it firsthand would one know that the goddess of life was on a completely different level from the 10 great primordial ancients. She was countless times stronger than the 10 great primordial ancients. No, it was too fast. I can't hide. This thought occurred to Patriarch Zhu Yin the instant he saw the jade hairpin. At this moment, a black shadow flashed by. Bam! A violent collision erupted, bringing with it a divine light explosion. Anlin had knocked the jade hairpin flying with his evil-slaying sword. Patriarch Zhu Yin drew a sharp intake of breath at the sight of the white-robed youth. Mr. Enlin. Thank you. Why are you being so polite? I should be the one thanking you for stepping forward for us, Enlin said with an elated expression. Patriarch Zhu Yin was exasperated. He only wanted to flex and had no intention of facing the heavenly life goddess, who had unleashed the three-phase true heavenly reincarnation formation. He wouldn't be able to experience just how powerful his enemy was without facing them in battle. He looked at the white-robed man standing in front of him, and his heart sighed with emotion. That immature youth's combat prowess was already superior to his own. At this moment, the life-threatening jade hairpin transformed into countless projections that hurtled toward Enlin from all directions, putting Enlin in a perilous situation. Thankfully, a sword projection imbued with boundless divine might struck the heavenly life goddess from the side, forcing the heavenly life goddess back and alleviating the pressure on Enlin. The attacker was none other than the ridiculously powerful little fairy, Tina. Enlin and Tina attacked the heavenly life goddess again. They were extremely well coordinated, and they were able to hold their own against the heavenly life goddess by attacking without any regard for their own energy expenditure. Right at this moment, the primordial beasts behind them were already closing in. Patriarch Zhu Yin didn't want to fight the heavenly life goddess, so he turned toward the primordial beasts and chortled with glee. Mr. Enlin, Miss Tina, you two take care of the heavenly life goddess. I'll hold off these primordial beasts for you. Enlin was ecstatic to hear this. Thank you, Senior Zhu Yin. Patriarch Zhu Yin's body quickly expanded, and he transformed into his true form of a dragon over 10 million feet in length. His body was so massive that it could crush any of the primordial beasts before him. Roar! Patriarch Zhu Yin whipped his tail through the air, and his tail, which was enshrouded in wind and lightning, flattened a mace-wielding mountain giant. At this moment, 3 ball-shaped primordial beasts crashed viciously into Patriarch Zhu Yin's body with extreme force. Wind, fire, and poison, 3 types of elemental powers that had reached the pinnacle of their powers instantly erupted, knocking Patriarch Zhu Yin back. Thankfully, Patriarch Zhu Yin's dragon scales were tough enough, so the impact didn't inflict much damage on him, except for a slight stomachache. Ha ha! Is this all the primordial beasts are capable of? Patriarch Zhu Yin was chortling with glee when a purple void lightning bird suddenly flashed past like a sword projection. Its body of lightning was over 10,000 feet in thickness, but it was pathetically small in comparison to the gargantuan body of over 10 million feet in length. However, it was this bolt of lightning that tore through the indestructible dragon scales and left a gash on Patriarch Zhu Yin's body. Die! Patriarch Zhu Yin blasted forth at the purple void lightning bird. The crimson-golden essential power transformed into heavenly flames that engulfed heaven and earth, and even though the purple void lightning bird was extremely fast, it was still unable to escape from Patriarch Zhu Yin's flames, which instantly reduced the purple void lightning bird's body to ashes. Ha ha! Do you see that? This is what you get for offending me. Patriarch Zhu Yin chortled with glee. However, the primordial beasts continued to pounce toward him, and more of them were coming at him. A dozen or so extremely powerful primordial beasts were unleashing terrifying flames upon him, and the terrifying energy encompassed the entire heavens, making the night sky even more dazzling than it was during the day. Damn it! Patriarch Zhu Yin looked at the fearless primordial beasts, and he finally realized that this wasn't going to be an easy task, but he still gritted his teeth and charged forward. Chapter 2347. Boom boom boom. Patriarch Zhu Yin and the Primordial Beast Legion were engaged in an extremely intense battle. Enlin and Tina were no longer being pursued by a horde of primordial beasts, so it was a lot easier for them to attack the life goddess. They were truly grateful to brother Zhu Yin for joining them. Will Zhu Yin be able to take on close to 100 primordial beasts on his own? Tina asked with a concerned expression as she attacked the life goddess. Don't worry, he's a paramount god of the ghost tribe. Look at his gargantuan body. He can kill a few primordial beasts just by rolling onto the ground, so there's nothing to be afraid of. Anlin was very impressed by Patriarch Zhu Yin's power. Oh! Tina's pink lips moved, but in the end, she didn't say that they were being suppressed by the primordial beast army. Perhaps Patriarch Zhu Yin really would be able to keep them at bay? Just as these thoughts were running through her mind, Patriarch Zhu Yin's blood-curdling cries erupted in the distance. Ow, ow, ow. The human-headed, dragon-bodied monster thrashed relentlessly in the air, as if some kind of power had invaded its body. Anlin looked around to discover that there were no other beasts attacking him except for the primordial beasts that Zhu Yin had just beaten back. All of the primordial beasts faltered momentarily upon seeing this, and all of them stared at Patriarch Zhu Yin with confusion in their eyes as if to ask him, "Are you King scamming us?" In the next instant, all of the human-headed, dragon-bodied monster's body suddenly self-detonated, sending boundless amounts of blood and flesh exploding into the air. Anlin could even sense that Patriarch Zhu Yin's essence had also been wounded to a certain extent. This power. Anlin looked up into the sky, and his pupils contracted as he exclaimed, "This is the backlash of the heavenly Tao. There's backlash." Patriarch Zhu Yin also discovered the source of the attack, and he couldn't help but let loose a torrent of abuse. "You're about to be blown up by the heaven-crushing sect, and you still have the time to retaliate against me?" Everyone knew that any god of creation on the Tai Chu continent who attacked a representative of the heavenly Tao would suffer backlash of varying degrees. Patriarch Zhu Yin had chosen to step in at that time as the three living beings really were on the verge of collapsing. Furthermore, Heaven-Crushing Sword had already progressed to the late heavenly stage, and the paramount heavenly Tao was already struggling to fend for itself, so it certainly didn't have the spare energy to deal with something like this. That was exactly what Patriarch Zhu Yin was thinking. Truth be told, there was a reason why he had appeared in the sea of abyssal hell, and why his voice had been frozen in place of the trillions of evil spirits and devils, and why he hadn't been in a hurry to destroy the gate of hell. Instead, he had been acting cool in front of the sea of abyssal hell. It was the idea of progressing step by step to see if the heavenly Tao would bite back. Later, when he saw that the heavenly Tao wouldn't retaliate, he felt at ease and blew up the gates of hell. However, he had never imagined that it was not that the heavenly Tao did not retaliate, but that there was a delay in the heavenly Tao's backlash. Patriarch Zhu Yin was in a terrible mood. "I feel like I've fallen into a pit." After bombarding Patriarch Zhu Yin for a while, the heavenly Tao finally stopped. At this moment, Patriarch Zhu Yin, who was over 1,000,000 feet tall, had already been reduced to a crippled dragon. His body was riddled with wounds, and his essence had been damaged as he gasped for breath. "Fellow Taoist Zhu Yin, are you all right?" Anlin was given a fright by Zhu Yin's pitiful state. "Do I look all right to you?" Patriarch Zhu Yin panted heavily. His body quickly shrank as he reverted back to his human form with a pair of dragon horns. Patriarch Zhu Yin was no longer as calm and refined as before. His entire body was drenched in blood, and his expression was extremely disheveled. His aura had also become a lot weaker. Only then did the dumbstruck beasts come to their senses. They knew that this was the best opportunity to attack, and they pounced toward Patriarch Zhu Yin in unison. Patriarch Zhu Yin's flesh crawled with fear at the sight of the oncoming beast. Even at his peak, he was already under immense pressure to deal with so many beasts, let alone now. The illusionary demonic kraken twisted space, the two-headed heavenly dragon summoned lightning, the dark shadow serpent flashed through the air like lightning, and the lava lizard spewed flames from the ground. "Save me, fellow Taoist Anlin." Patriarch Zhu Yin was forced into a corner by the beasts, and he could no longer maintain his image as a mighty figure, and he yelled for help at Anlin, who was busy dealing with the life goddess. Anlin naturally couldn't just ignore Patriarch Zhu Yin. The golden halo behind him rotated rapidly, and he flashed toward Patriarch Zhu Yin at an extremely fast speed, leaving a series of afterimages in his wake before unleashing an almighty fist toward the beasts pouncing toward Patriarch Zhu Yin. Boom! The power of the new 5 elements fused perfectly with the fist of the heavenly Tao. The terrifying power of the punch caused the void hammer in front of it to explode, and the dozens of prehistoric beasts were all forced back by this attack. Run! Unlin yelled in a loud voice. Patriarch Zhu Yin didn't hesitate, and he immediately fled toward the exit of the land of creation. The beasts wanted to give chase. After all, it was very important for a god of creation to land the killing blow. However, Patriarch Zhu Yin's escape abilities were no joke. Aside from a few beasts that were able to keep up with his speed, all of the other beasts had been left behind. Fellow Taoist and Lin, I'm not feeling well, so I'll be taking my leave now. Even though he was fleeing in a very disheveled manner, Patriarch Zhu Yin's heroic voice still sounded in the distance. Rest in peace, fellow Taoist Zhu Yin. Unlin held off the beasts for Patriarch Zhu Yin. However, following Patriarch Zhu Yin's escape, the situation on the battlefield changed again. Tina was facing off against the life goddess, while Unlin was facing off against a few dozen beasts. Both of them were engaged in an arduous battle, and it could even be described as a perilous situation. Everything had been disrupted by Patriarch Zhu Yin's appearance. Fellow Taoist Unlin. Patriarch Zhu Yin looked at Unlin with complex emotions. His heart was filled with warmth, but at the same time, he was also feeling very guilty. Not only had he not been of any help, but he had even become a burden? After all, Unlin and Tina had been playing along quite well. They were kiting the primordial beasts before chasing after the life goddess. Now, in order to prevent the primordial beasts from attacking him, they had no choice but to keep the primordial beasts at bay. Ding Xiaoru, oh Ding Xiaoru, you're the most powerful being of the opposite shore realm, the paramount god of the ghost tribe. But in the end, you've become a coward who only knows how to run and hold others back? Patriarch Zhu Yin took a deep breath and looked at his storage ring. As a god of creation from the Tai Chu continent, he had quite a few trump cards, so a light flashed from his storage ring. 3 pills that made heaven and earth tremble appeared in his hand. These were 3 high-rank divine pills. Patriarch Zhu Yin swallowed the 3 high-rank divine pills at once, upon which terrifying power erupted from the pills and quickly healed the injuries he had sustained from the backlash of the heavenly Tao. In fact, the pill contained top-notch Tao energy. Even his damaged source was showing signs of gradually recovering. Soon, most of the injuries he had sustained were healed by the fearsome power of the pills. Patriarch Zhu Yin's fleeing body faltered before he turned around and flew toward Unlin. Mr. Unlin. I'm back. Chapter 2348. Mr. Zhu Yin. Unlin's heart jolted at the sight of Patriarch Zhu Yin. Why are you back? I'm here to help you. A determined expression appeared on Patriarch Zhu Yin's face. My injuries have completely healed, so you don't have to worry. Unlin took a closer look, and sure enough, he could sense that the other party's injuries had mostly healed. He couldn't help but be astonished. After sensing the vigorous medicinal power erupting from the other party's body, he came to a sudden realization. So this was also a player with money. Several seconds later, Patriarch Zhu Yin transformed into his true form over 1,000,000 feet tall before pouncing toward the several dozen primordial beasts. Unlin, go and help Tina, Patriarch Zhu Yin instructed in a domineering voice. Unlin was very happy that Patriarch Zhu Yin was able to return to the battlefield, and he nodded in response. All right. Hang in there. As long as the Tao of the Life Goddess unleashes her true form of time, we'll be able to win this battle. He flew toward Tina with his evil-slaying sword in hand. Tina used her ultra-powerful swordsmanship to defend herself against the Life Goddess Jade Hairpin, and the space within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers was shattered before it even had a chance to heal. Tina's divine mirror world sword was super powerful and had already transcended beyond the realm of divine tools. It was a heavenly Tao-level weapon, and her swordsmanship was at the pinnacle of the Tai Chu continent. Even so, she was still struggling to breathe under the life goddess' relentless attacks. A series of gashes and holes appeared on her petite body, and even though they weren't lethal wounds, they were still extremely painful to deal with. At this moment, a black sword projection flashed through the air and sliced through the jade hairpin. Enlin had rejoined the battle against the life goddess. Giant Enlin. An elated smile appeared on Tina's face. She had nothing to fear now that she could fight alongside Enlin. The two of them unleashed another frenzied barrage of attacks toward the life goddess, and the tables were turned once again. At this moment, at the central region of the White Nectar Sea, countless earth-shattering collisions erupted, as if the sun were flashing incessantly. All of a sudden, boundless spear projections tore through the night sky, turning the starry night sky into a vast expanse of silver. The sky crocodile's blood-curdling screeches reverberated through the heavens and the earth as its massive body fell into the sea. After its strength skyrocketed, its skin, which had become especially hard, was pierced by the silver spear, leaving bloody holes. Blackstone gripped the silver-white spear with both hands. His pitch-black wings stretched out for hundreds of thousands of meters, covering the entire sky. The extremely sharp silver-white spear light became the only color in the world, like a peerless heavenly sword in the eternal night. Ultimate Creation's Spear of Truth. God-Slayer. Blackstone gripped his spear with both hands and thrust it towards the sky crocodile. The extreme spear radiance brought with it the power to split the heavens and earth as it fell from the sky. The silvery white origin force illuminated the sky and the sea into a silvery white ocean. There was a spear, the only truth, that pierced through the heavens and the earth, piercing through the boundaries, directly breaking through the absolute sky defense of the sky crocodile, and directly piercing through the head of the sky crocodile. The sky crocodile's body shuddered, and a deeper level of its essence was also destroyed by the silver spear projection at this moment. The silver spear light dissipated. The broken body fell into the sea and was swallowed by the bottomless whirlpool. Phew! Blackstone heaved a sigh of relief as cold sweat dripped down her pale face. She retracted her wings, but her spear-wielding arm was still trembling slightly. It was clear that she had overexerted herself in that last attack. I won. Her eyes were bright, and a smile appeared on her face. Even though her face was a little pale, her smile was still breathtakingly beautiful. She had relied on her absolute power to slay the sky crocodile. This was not an easy feat. She had completed the mission given to her by the heaven-crushing goddess. This was what made her the happiest. At this moment, the heaven-crushing united army spectating from afar were all extremely excited. It was another hearty victory. Every victory was worthy of their happiness. The Dark Wing Emperor's eyes lit up as a strange emotion welled up in his heart. This was the attitude that a top-tier powerful being in the Dark Wing tribe should have. He didn't know what the Black Stone Goddess thought of him, or whether she would be interested in him. Gradually, a burst of fighting spirit welled up in the Dark Wing Emperor's heart. He felt like the reason why he had been single for tens of thousands of years was finally here. At this moment, the black-robed woman put away her spear and swallowed 2 immortal pills. It's a pity that I've overexerted myself and can't continue to fight. Blackstone was a little concerned as he looked at his other 2 companions, who were embroiled in a bitter battle. Mou and Tion were still embroiled in a bitter battle. The 3 living beings and Blackstone were in an extremely feeble state after taking care of their enemies, so they couldn't do anything. Perhaps the only one who could help was Flowing Gold. However, he was also severely disabled, so his combat prowess was about the same as that of a god of creation in the infinite realm of stars. Perhaps he was even a little weaker. At this level of power, he would most likely only cause more trouble. Flowing Gold felt like he shouldn't embarrass himself like this. At this moment, The Sword Maiden and Lin were engaged in a mixed attack against a round rock. The Sword Maiden viciously struck the rock, sending it flying. Then, Lin's heavenly threads sliced through the rock like a net, sending it flying again. After the rock was sent flying, the Sword Maiden wielded her heavenly sword and struck the rock in front of her again, sending it flying again. Thus, it was struck back and forth by the Sword Maiden and Lin, but it couldn't find a chance to retaliate. Of course, it wasn't completely useless in this battle. At the very least, the two beauties were sweating profusely and exhausted from their attack. Damn it! Why is this thing so hard? The Sword Maiden gritted her teeth. Lin also had a headache as she looked at the cracks on the surface of the rock. They could injure Mou and inflict large and small cuts on its body, but they were unable to slice the rock in half, nor were they able to destroy Mou's God of Creation essence. This was because this rock was a large world. Unless they could slice a large world in half, they wouldn't be able to inflict lethal damage on Mou. Only at this moment did the two heavenly beings realize just how troublesome Mou was. If this continued, they would either be smashed to death by Mou or die from exhaustion. Lin, what should we do? We can't continue like this. The Sword Maiden began to panic as she watched the 10 ancient beings fall one after another. Lin's clear eyes swept across the battlefield before finally locking onto Heisher. This one is too hard to kill, so let's change targets. Lin spoke calmly. The Sword Maiden's eyes also lit up. That's right, why did they have to chase after a bunch of flesh instead of killing them? After the Sword Lady slashed Mou away again, she immediately rode her sword through the void like a stream of light, piercing the black stone in the distance. Lin used the heaven's thread to pierce through space and stepped on the white thread. Her body drew an exaggerated arc on top of the white thread before shooting forward like an arrow. To everyone's surprise, the two primordial celestial beings suddenly pounced toward Heisher, who was already extremely feeble. Chapter 23:49. Look out, Black Stone! Flowing Gold yelled in a panicked voice upon seeing the two heavenly beings unleash attacks. He immediately tried to chase after the heavenly beings, but he was far too slow. Even Mou was unable to catch up to the two primordial heavenly beings. A crimson light erupted from the Sword Maiden's celestial sword. The heavenly threads in Lin's hand tore through space as if they were slicing through tofu before sweeping toward Black Stone from all directions. This attack was enough to seal off all of Black Stone's paths of retreat. Black Stone could sense extreme peril and the threat of death looming over her, but she did not retreat or run. Instead, she quickly pulled out her silver spear and adopted a battle stance. Running away was useless. The only way out was to fight. Heaven and Earth, projection heavenly net. Lin abruptly tugged at the air, and countless sharp white threads appeared from thin air, forming a massive spherical net that trapped Black Stone at the center before quickly converging with extreme sharpness. These were threads that could even shred the bodies of God of Creation stage beings. Countless phenomena appeared on the threads, all of which were imbued with the power of the Tao realm and could nullify all types of attacks, thereby maximizing the power of the heavenly threads. Black Stone flew toward a certain direction without any hesitation before thrusting her spear forward like a dragon. However, the spear was unable to pierce through the extremely resilient heavenly threads, and it only managed to emit a sharp screeching sound. You can't even break through with a single point? Black Stone faltered slightly. She knew that she could definitely do this if she was at her peak, but she was too weak now. At this moment, the heavenly threads had already converged. There was no need for the Sword Maiden to do anything. Lin alone was enough to cut her to death. Black Stone was filled with indignation. All of a sudden, water vapor began to condense around her. At the same time, the amount of water rapidly increased. Just as she was trying to figure out what this was, the water suddenly exploded. A graceful mermaid with snowy white skin suddenly appeared beside her. Her divine halo released an extremely dazzling divine light, and there was a blue divine symbol on her forehead, as she activated the power within her body to the extreme. It's actually a medium jump. Just who are you? Blackstone took a deep breath and looked at the beautiful stranger in front of him. At this time, a pale golden ball of water had already appeared in the mermaid's palm. It expanded wildly and touched Blackstone's body like a cool breeze. However, when it collided with the heavenly silk, it was like an extremely strong iron wall. It actually blocked the heavenly silk's attack in its place. My heaven thread was actually blocked by the water? Lin was shocked. The heavenly threads contained the absolute will and laws of the heavenly Tao that could cut through all things. However, the faint golden ball of water before him actually contained the power of the heavenly Tao as well. Moreover, it was the power of the heavenly Tao that was extremely powerful. Water could transform all things into yin and yang. The celestial thread's attack was blocked. Not only that, but the celestial threads began to bend and deform under the pressure of the expanding ball of water, emitting cracking sounds. The mermaid who had suddenly appeared to save the day was none other than the leader of the West Sea Alliance, Lan Xiaoni. Furthermore, this was Lan Xiaoni who had activated her ultimate water mystic technique. One had to know that she hadn't even used the ultimate water secret technique when she was fighting against the three heavenly gods. But now she was using it. It was all for this moment. She was going to unleash her potential in a battle of the highest caliber. Break it again, Lan Xiaoni instructed Blackstone. Blackstone stabbed his spear forward without any hesitation. After combining the power of the golden ball of water, the heavenly threads were finally unable to withstand this attack, and they were instantly shattered. Blackstone and Lan Xiaoni broke out of the cage at the same time. However, they had only just emerged when an earth-shattering sword strike awaited them. The Sword Maiden's attack suddenly appeared. A crimson sword projection pierced through the air with the extremely concentrated power of the heavenly Tao realm as well as the Tao of death as it slashed down upon the two women. This sword strike was even more terrifying than the heavenly thread cage from before. After all, the heavenly threads from before focused on trapping and slicing, but this sword strike only had one word to describe it: kill. The killing intent was extremely potent. The sharpness of the blade was unmatched. The hair on Blackstone's body stood on end. Even in her peak condition, she would find it extremely difficult to face this sword strike, let alone in her current state. However, Lan Xiaoni seemed to have anticipated this, and she waved a hand through the air, upon which a golden wave surged forth in a frenzy toward the terrifying sword projection. The sword projection instantly tore through the golden wave. Just as Blackstone was feeling a sense of foreboding, the more the sword projection advanced through the golden wave, the weaker its sword might became. The paramount sword might was constantly being whittled away by the golden wave. Water could wash away everything, but it could also dissolve everything. Lan Xiaoni had unleashed the power of water to the fullest. When the Sword Maiden's terrifying sword projection reached Lan Xiaoni had already materialized a deep blue water sword, which shattered the Sword Maiden's sword projection with a single sword strike. Both sides fell silent. Blackstone was completely dumbstruck. Never would she have thought that she would be protected by a Tao integration stage woman, and she was also ridiculously powerful. The Sword Maiden was in complete disbelief. Was this the power of a normal heavenly god? She would have thought that she was facing a paramount heavenly god if she didn't say anything. Sword Maiden, she won't be able to last much longer in this state. Let's attack her together, and she won't be able to hold on for much longer. Lin charged toward Blackstone and Lan Xiaoni again. The Sword Maiden came to her senses. That's right, she had been frightened by Lan Xiaoni's display of power, but she didn't know that Lan Xiaoni was definitely using some kind of mystic technique that required an extremely heavy price. With this in mind, the Sword Maiden's confidence swelled explosively again. However, at this moment, snow suddenly began to fall from the sky. The Sword Maiden shuddered involuntarily as she sensed a bone-chilling sensation, and she looked up into the sky. A blue vortex had appeared in the center of the sky. Snow fell from the sky, and a frosty aura froze the entire sky. There was a white-robed woman, cold and aloof. She stepped lightly in the air, and with every step she took, lotuses bloomed as she walked towards the direction of the Sword Lady. Lan Xiaoni's divine seal appeared, and she raised a hand to summon pure blue seawater. Big Sister Shangguan, I'll lend you 100,000 feet of heavenly water. A faint smile appeared on the white-robed woman's face, and 100,000 feet of seawater, which was imbued with the power of the heavenly god of water, quickly froze before blossoming like a lotus flower. In the end, a deep blue ice sword appeared from the center of the lotus flower, and it fell toward the Sword Maiden as if it were a free fall. There was no aura or sword might, only pure water and pure ice. The blue of water, the chill of ice. The Sword Maiden gripped her sword in an attempt to defend herself, only to find that she was completely immobilized. Her body had already been covered in frost, and her body had been corroded by the peculiar power of frost. No, no. A look of horror appeared on the Sword Maiden's face. The blue frosty sword fell. Constant dripping water could pierce through a rock. It punctured her head. Countless shards of ice flew through the air.